Welcome to the One Gang Worldwide podcast, your ultimate ride into the world of motorcycles. Visit CyclesWorldwide.com, where we offer a completely free marketplace for everything motorcycles. Join our One Gang community where you can connect, share info, and swap stories with riders from all over the world. Join for free at CyclesWorldwide.com and be a part of the One Gang community right now. On today's episode of the One Gang Worldwide podcast, we're tuning in with Jason Hallman, the mastermind behind Garage Built and CycleStopUSA. Jason celebrated for his deep involvement in and coverage of the custom motorcycle scene and establishing CycleStopUSA, an excellent online custom parts store. Jason will discuss the challenges of maintaining a successful parts distribution business, the motivation behind the Garage Built podcast, and will provide insights into the custom scene. So let's kickstart this conversation and delve into the nuts and bolts of building and supplying with Jason Hallman, right here on the One Gang podcast.
I do the maze backwards. I am obsessed with knowing things about what I'm doing. I don't want to ever be the smartest man in the room, because if you're the smartest dude in the room, you're in the wrong room. Get out of there as fast as you can. Be kind, be nice, light the room up as long as you can, but get out.
Hey, One Gang, if you enjoy the podcast, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You can turn notifications on to hear when new episodes are dropped too. Any of your engagement supports the show and helps us book great guests and keeps us going. If you or a friend would make a great guest, hit us up at CyclesWorldwide.com or drop a comment. Thank you guys so much.
One Gang Worldwide podcast, brought to you by Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping. Since 1978, Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping has been the trusted name in transporting motorcycles safely across the country. With custom designed pallets and air ride trailers, your bike is secure and protected every step of the way. By choosing Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping, you're supporting a dedicated small business that prioritizes quality and customer satisfaction. Ship with a peace of mind, knowing your motorcycle is in expert hands.
Please visit shippingmymotorcycle.com. That's shippingmymotorcycle.com. And now, back to our show.
Hey, One Gang, welcome to the show. Today we've got Jason Hallman on of the Garage Built podcast. He's a bike builder. He's the owner of CycleStopUSA in Lakeland, Florida. We are excited to have him. He is the man, so we are looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us, Jason.
Hey, man, thank you for having me.
Jason, thanks, buddy. Thanks for coming on, man. I guess we'll do it like we always do. Let's kind of get into the younger Jason. Tell us a little bit where you grew up. What were you like as a kid? You know, what were some of your passions as a young man?
Well, I did grow up in a motorcycle household.
Nice.
So my dad was a builder. When he came home from the military in 1971, he immediately went and bought a Triumph chopper that somebody else had built originally.
Sweet.
Right. And it just kind of went from there. Once he had somebody else's bikes and he knew he wanted to build his own. Right. So it just kind of kept remorphosizing,
Right.
if that's a real word, but he would build it and then build it again and build it again and build it again. And so we lived in a neighborhood that almost doesn't exist anymore in Detroit. And we lived there until it was time for me to go to school. It was a neighborhood called Brightmoor. And really the only thing that's left there are a few houses, but like on Google Earth, if you look at it, it's basically just a big field. And so Detroit has, just like New York has boroughs like Harlem, Manhattan, things like that. Detroit has neighborhoods, right? And that neighborhood, Brightmoor, is essentially gone. But because there's so many major roads in and out of it, there's still a bunch of motorcycle clubs in that area. And that's the area that I grew up
Nice.
in. My dad was never in a club, but all those clubs were right by where we lived, and we frequented them. My dad did anyway. He was always a biker. And so that's kind of how I found my way intrinsically into the motorcycle world, right? I had an Uncle Puke, and that's what they called him. You know what I mean? I don't know what the guy's name is today, but it was just kind of a situation like that, and just grew from there. I didn't.
Did your dad take you on the back of the bike a lot, or
on the front? So what my earliest memory, people ask me like that, and I can recall it pretty vividly. My earliest memory of anything, I was on the front of my dad's Triumph, and he had like this. It was kind of a hybrid prism coffin tank kind of thing. And I can recall the bike very well. I do have some pictures of it, of me with the bike and that. They didn't have a youth motorcycle helmet. So I remember they had this yellow helmet that they had bought me that was stuffed so it would fit.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember we rode to the bank, and I remember the bank and everything went to National Bank of Detroit, right on Beach Daily and like 5 Mile or 6 Mile. And when we got off the motorcycle, this woman started bitching at my dad about, he shouldn't be on there. He's too young and everything. And I just remember one of my dad's catchphrases, and he said it to her. I remember him telling her to blow it out her ass. And
mind
so,
your own business, man.
yeah, I can remember that bike in that situation very vividly. And, I can remember when we had moved out of there, out of that town, out of that part of the city, and moved into Farmington Hills, ironically, in the most white trash part of one of the nicest suburbs in the Detroit area. Still had dirt roads like in the 70s and 80s, right? But it was right in the city, right off of Grand River. And I can remember laying in bed and listening to my dad drive that bike to work, and I could hear him for what seemed endlessly, go through all 4 gears until you couldn't hear him anymore.
Cool.
He rode that show bike everywhere. He showed it at I remember the state fairgrounds in Detroit had a winter show, and I don't know that they do it anymore. I don't know if the state fairgrounds is still in Detroit, but they had a show, and we didn't have a trailer, we didn't have a van, so my dad rode his bike in February in the snow to the show, packed it in, and they classed him in Radical Custom because the tank was molded into the frame.
Oh,
And that was like a differentiation in classes between Radical or Custom and Radical Custom. Right. And he was pissed because Arlen and specifically Arlen and Tony Carlini and Ron Finch showed up with bikes that were
in Detroit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. If you talk to Arlen's not with us anymore, but if you talk to like DP, Dave Perowitz, he'll tell you like the Detroit shows were a big thing. That's actually where he met Arlen, was at a show called Detroit. And really the timing of everything, I think it was the same show. I can't prove it. I'm trying to kind of historically try to find the poster from it. If I can find the poster from it and kind of put pieces and parts together. But they showed up with their bikes in vans, and their bikes weren't assembled. They had to put them together. They would fire them one time and to qualify, right? And sometimes they wouldn't even stay. Like literally, if you talk to DP, he'll tell you that they would go to these shows, and they would go to the show on Friday, show the bike, get it judged, put it back in the van, and go to another show on Saturday.
That's messed up.
You know what I mean? And they would win. They'd win prize money, and they would show up and win. Well, so anyway, my dad was pissed because he rode his bike there. So when we went home, my dad cut a line where the tank meets the fender, where the Bondo is.
Yeah.
And then refinished that whole part of the bike. He'd redone the bike one time, twice actually. He took the Bates seat off and put a King Queen on it. And but I have a bunch of pictures of that bike that are actually really, really cool.
Did your mom ride with him too, or no?
Oh yeah,
nice,
absolutely.
Nice. So you grew up in a great household. Shit.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great household that, it didn't seem, there was a lot of things that didn't, when you're a little kid, everything seems normal. Right. No matter the situation. I can tell you that my mom was the most supportive person of my dad supportive of her. So really, as long as they were together, it didn't really matter what they did, but they did a lot. I mean, it was very motorcycle centric. And yes, my mom, I can't remember this, but my mom recalls the story of sitting there with the manual and telling my dad while he's rebuilding the engine, do this. He would do it, like the Climber manual or the Chilton manual. Right. So my mom was intimately involved, and they built it in the basement, and the basement stairs went like 4 stairs up and then turned and 4 stairs out. And my dad built his whole bike in the basement and couldn't get the bike. They had to take the bike apart to get it up through the stairs. Right. 3 or 4 guys someone carrying the girder, and so yeah. And then he parked it my mom said he parked it in the goddamn living room all the time. But it was because he didn't want to get it stolen. Right. I mean, we lived in that's the kind of neighborhood we lived in. He would not leave his bike in the garage. The garage had a dirt floor and had access to the alleyway, and it was Detroit. And it was the 70s, but it was still, it was pretty shady.
So what was your situation growing up when you once you got into like high school? What were you like? Were you riding at that time? What was your life like as a young guy?
So I competed as an expert amateur in freestyle BMX.
Nice, sweet.
And so that was, I mean, I grew up on 2 wheels. I always said my dad bought me dirt bikes and shit like that. But I was a BMX kid, like full stop. Yeah. Like that was all I did. And then I got my driver's license, and I grew up in Detroit, right? That's the Motor City. Right. And, bikers were not what I was going to be. I still don't consider myself a biker. We can get into that later, but bikers were a certain way in Detroit, and we have a certain there's a certain thing that people don't know. If you're not from Detroit, and if no one's ever told you this, we have a unique community of motorcycle riders in Detroit that is unlike anywhere else in the country. Like, I can prove it. And so that wasn't my path. My path was cars, and that's all I cared about was drag racing. And I drag raced from the minute I got my driver's license. It was drag racing cars and building hot rods and getting faster and faster and faster and faster.
What kind
and
of
better.
cars were you using?
So right off the rip, I was always a Mustang guy. Nice. And then
Fox bodies?
I had a Nova. This is pre-Fox body, right? I've been a Mustang guy my whole life because my dad, when he had the chopper, he also had a 65 Mustang Fastback.
Sweet.
In its day, it had cheater slicks on it that he drove to work at Ford Motor Company every day, and it had Volkswagen tires on the front with little Anson mags. So he had front runners, and they tell me that they used to put me in the back and they would pile the laundry around me in the fast street race that. So my dad street raced and was a biker. My dad was a biker, a real biker. And so I was into that. And then I got into Novas in high school. I got into Chevys, and I built a big block for it. And then I took the big block out, put it in Malibu, and I crashed that street racing. Really, really bad crash. No one died, but it was a very scary crash for me. And so I kind of didn't really do as much on the street after that. The cars get faster and faster and faster. And the guys that I came up with were the pioneers of the 5 liters. Like, so the Fox body Mustang pioneers, like Donnie Walsh Jr., Eric Coleman is a very close friend of mine. And Eric Coleman in that capacity, like, nobody did what he did to this day. Nobody's been a pioneer like he was, underground pioneer. But he was in, he was in Hot Rod magazine a bunch.
Is he still doing all that stuff?
Eric doesn't drive anymore, but he's, he was just over the weekend. He was at the Snowbird National, or the shootout that was in Bradenton here with Kai Kelly. And so Eric's very active in that. Mike Moran, who owns Moran Motorsports. So if you're in the drag racing area, like, I grew up with Keith Szabo, who, rest in peace. He died a couple years ago during COVID, not from COVID, but during that time. He was, these guys were professional street racers, and that's what they did. And so those are the guys I came up with. And then in 2003, I had 2 little kids. 2002 was my last year of drag racing. I went to a race and I broke my car, and I come back to the pits in my golf cart, and I pull up to my trailer, and both of my little girls are in the trailer playing with a dollhouse, having a good time. They were none the wiser. My wife's sitting underneath the canopy with a good book, none the wiser. And I thought, you know what? This is bullshit. I'm doing this. We're all doing this for me, and I'm not doing anything. I'm just really, just kind of spending money and having fun, but it wasn't a family enough thing. It might have been different if I had kids that were interested in it, but my kids really weren't.
Two young kids, man.
Yeah. And so when I broke the car, I fixed it the last time, put it up on jack stands, kept it in my garage. It was cool. It was a fast car. So if somebody came in, I fired it up for them, whatever, it ran 9s on motor. And my dad called me from Daytona in 2003, and he's like, you won't freaking believe this. This is banana. He had never been to Daytona. He's like, this is bananas. This is the coolest thing I'd ever seen. He goes, I'm telling you, Arlen had his jet bike there that year. And I just saw Arlen Ness go by on a bike powered by a jet. The craziest shit ever. So I went to the Harley dealer while he was still down in Daytona, and I bought my first Harley. And within,
what'd you buy?
Within 11, I bought an 883 Custom. It looked like it was chopper enough for me. And that was the last year you could buy a bike. I bought that bike in March, sold it in Detroit, sold it to some dude in Alabama for about $3,000 more than I paid for it. And I think that's the last time anybody will ever do that. Go to the dealership. Money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was just it. And then we started in December 3rd of 2003. We opened the bike shop. My dad had always wanted to have a bike shop, but could never put the pieces and parts together to do it. And so every year he would get laid off in the wintertime, and would just be on unemployment. He was a union guy. And so I was like, shit, let's just open a bike shop and see how it works. And he never went back to work.
And this is in Detroit.
Man.
This was in Detroit at the time. Yeah. Yep. And he never went back to work. And then about 10 months, 11 months later, I went into work one day, and they were giving me some shit. And I was like, fuck you. Right. I literally told them, fuck you. I'm out of here. I'm not putting up with your bullshit. You know, the guy that owned the business didn't fire me, had one of his guys do it. And I just told him, tell him to fuck off.
Right.
And I went to parts, got a box and came back. I was making really good money. I just bought, it was scary. I had just bought like a giant fucking
Hey,
house. I was
did
making
you do it?
loads
Did you
of
do
cash.
it like half baked style when he quit his job and he's like, "F you, F you, you're cool." Did you ever see
Oh,
that?
no. I mean, I was thinking that in my head, but no, I went to parts, I got a box. I went home and my wife's like, what are you doing here? And I told her, I'm not doing that anymore. And she was like freaking out.
Right.
It was scary. I mean, it's still scary sometimes. Here we are 21 years later. And
Yeah.
you know, I have a great life, but it's a roller
No,
coaster
for
ride
sure,
every
brother, for
day.
sure. I'm in the same boat, man. 23 years on my own, so I get it.
Yeah.
The
So, but I mean, the bike thing just kind of happened, you know, and my dad and I became best friends as soon as I bought a bike. I mean, not that we weren't friends before, but now
you had a bonding.
we could do everything together.
Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome.
So it was awesome.
That is killer. I just was listening to the Sean Ryan show with Andrew Huberman, and just what you were saying made me think about the advice that he got when he was younger. No matter how far you drive, you're always the same distance to the ditch. And I think that that's incredible advice, and especially it resonated with me for that entrepreneurial spirit, because you feel like, you know, coming out of your job, going into a big mortgage, and you got that to worry about it. But if you don't show up to work and make things happen, you're still, you know, you can feel like you're that close to the ditch, even when, you know, 20 years later, when you're living well and you got, you know, successful entrepreneurial endeavors. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, here's the thing that I'll tell you about being an entrepreneur. Is that in the car business, that was the business I was in. They said that the higher you go up the chain of command, the closer you are to the front door, right, or to the road. They used to say Ford Road because that was the road that it was on. And so I learned that when in 2008, when the crash happened, I was 5 years into my business. Man. I learned that nobody has job security.
Yeah.
And the job security is like jumbo shrimp. It's military intelligence. It's a misnomer, and and it's bullshit. And so the only assurance that you're ever going to get is from yourself.
That's right.
That's it.
That's right.
You know, you got to get, I'm not a very disciplined guy, trust me, but I'm disciplined enough that for some reason I haven't shut this off yet. And I'm 21 years in. I'm not patting myself on the back. And what I'm saying is that you got to be dumb enough to keep going sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had an experience early on, man, at a young age. We had a family friend. The guy worked for AT&T for like, dude, it was like 35 years, something crazy, right? And he was coming up on his like retirement and a full-blown pension, and they just cut his legs from under him, gave him a couple of years severance, and they just threw him out there in his like late 50s at the time. It's like, you know, basically unhirable at this point in time. And I just remember as a kid.
I'm unemployable.
Yeah. And I just remember as a kid, and I'm going like, hell no, this isn't going to be me. I'm never going to be that statistic. If I'm going to die working, then I'm going to die working for myself. And that's kind of how like I've lived my whole life, man. So I get what
no
you're
retirement,
saying.
none of that
401k,
shit.
what the hell is that, man?
Right.
I was talking to Dave Perowitz this is probably last year. You know, he and I are pretty tight. And I was like, Dave, I go, let me ask you a question. I go, are you ever going to retire? And I get the whole sentence out before I let him respond. I said, are you ever going to retire and just, or are they going to find you dead next to that motorcycle hoist? And he goes, yep. He goes, I'm telling you right now, Jay. He goes, I'm going to work every day. And he told me, he goes, and Dave told this to me. And so I think about this when I'm having a shitty day. Like he gets up he's 72 years old.
Yeah.
And or 73 years old. He gets up every single day knowing that he gets to go to work on motorcycles, and that's enough for him. And he goes, they'll find me dead next to this horse. I'll just drop dead here. And there's no 401k plan. There's no retirement plan. There's none of that shit. He does not suffer himself with worrying about worry.
Yeah.
Some things, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Funny thing about Perowitz too, is I grew up like 3 towns from him. So as a kid, being a gearhead, I had pictures of his bikes on my wall, man, from Hot Bike and all the magazines that he had, the King of Flames. I mean, he was a big hero of mine growing up. So, I mean, being, you know, just a few towns away. So I remember, man, like he's just one of those guys. He's the Arlen Ness. He's like that small group of, you know, the pioneers.
Pioneers. Yeah. I mean, that's why I always say if there's a Mount Rushmore of custom motorcycle industry, you know, he's on it
Absolutely.
without a question.
Yeah.
He's probably one of the first. He's probably the
Agreed.
first face that gets
Agreed.
chiseled on there.
Agreed.
You know? He's never had a job.
I know.
Right.
I know, that's
He's worked his
That's
ass off, but he's
crazy.
never had a job.
right.
It's crazy to think about. Speaking of jobs, I wanted to ask you, Jason, what was it like? You mentioned you were in radio prior, and how did you get into that? How did that transpire?
I got into radio. So when I graduated high school, I couldn't have gone to an Ivy League school, but I probably could have gotten into University of Michigan if I had tried. I definitely could have got into State, Ferris State, any of those public universities, and my parents would have paid for it. And I can't stress, there isn't a pejorative term in the English language to explain how poorly I performed in school. Like it was an absolute art of me getting through school, because I looked at what I had to do. I was just telling somebody this story the other day. I look at everything this way, right? I do the maze backwards, like everything I do. And when I write a business plan, when my wife and I are going to go on vacation, I do the maze backwards. Where do I want to end up? And that's where I start. And then I find where I'm at now. And so I looked at what classes I had to have, and I picked the classes, and I made sure I got them out of the way and took the easiest course I could. Like math is not, it's not up for discussion. Right? If you can manipulate, if you can understand the structure of numbers, there's absolutely no reason to know algebra.
Right.
Algebra, in my opinion, I can tell you this as an educator, algebra is used as a theoretical tool to determine problem solving skills for people. And they use math to do it. Right. Yeah. So I think it's bullshit. I've never had an algebra class ever in my life, and no one has ever given me an adult algebra test. Right. So I'm good. Right. So I did that. I do everything with that. And so I ended up graduating with honors. And I did that because I had 4 hours of auto shop a day. I went to a killer. I mean, the picture, we had like a 40 bay, you know, it was funded by General Motors. It was the heck yeah. We had a high school drag car that ran, you know, low 13s. I mean, that was that's what I did. Right. And I worked for the original Ram Chargers in high school. Wow. That's who I worked for. Well, the candy stripe cars. So I wasn't going back to school. My mom was like, "You're going to school." And I was like, "No, it's not happening." The only thing I got out of high school was the fuck out of there as fast as I could, blazing a trail out of there. I got out, and I ended up graduating. I looked back, it was like a 3.4, 3.6, something like that. So academically, I was handled. I had those tassels they put on you for had to go to the honors presentation for my mom. You know, she had the sticker. I still have the bumper sticker somewhere. This is my son, you know, is on the honor roll at John High School. Whatever.
Oh, honey.
So I was like,
They did that shit back then? Wow, that's fun.
Oh, yeah. I just found it. It's in a box.
That's so funny.
So I wasn't doing that. You know, I was not what I was going to do. I wanted to do cars. And I kept being told it's not an adult profession. You know, you don't want to be a mechanic. You don't want to be a mechanic. And to some degree, you know, my mom and I talk now, and she was right. I don't want to just that's not right. You know, my hands hurt, my back hurts, my feet hurt. I got, you know, I'm an old man now. I literally, I'm older than all the people I thought were old when I was a kid. Right. Yep. So I just picked something out of the sky. I was like, I'll go to radio school. And there was a big radio school that was very successful in Detroit. And I went through there and I did the same thing. I graduated and I went right back to the Ram Chargers. And I was there one day and I get a phone call from a guy I was in school with. He said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm working." He goes, "Yeah, I know you're working, but what are you doing?" Like, I had somebody my age for the first time go like, "Hey, dude, like,
what are you doing with your life?
What are you doing? Right. Like, are you going to do anything? You know, we just went through the school together. Are you going to make something of it?" And I was like, "Probably not, dude." He goes, "Well, I got a job. Come out here." So I drove to the other side of Michigan and I go to this job interview, and this lady is interviewing me while she's talking to a mic just like this. And her name was Laura Daniels. That was her name on the radio. And she's like, you know, 98.3 WLCS. And then in between the
still got it.
She's like, "Hey," she's like, "You know, can you come up, you know, when can you start?" And then she's like, "Hang on one second." She's like, "That was Sonny and Cher with I've Got You, Babe," on 98.3 WLCS.
Dude, that's killer, man.
And so she's like doing this whole thing. I'm doing an imitation of her.
That's so awesome.
We're going back and forth. And I'm like, "I got this tape. You should probably listen to my tape. Make sure I'm good enough." She's like, "Yeah, okay." She puts the tape in for saying, "Can you start Tuesday?" So I went home. packed all my shit, moved to the other side of Michigan, $3.85 an hour or $4.25, so whatever minimum wage was.
Right, yeah.
And dude, I had no friends because I knew this kid, but we weren't really like tight or anything.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend lived at home 4 hours away or 3.5 hours away. And
Man.
I didn't make any money. And dude, it was, you can't work full time in the radio industry. When you're doing a 6-hour shift, you have to work 7 days at 42 hours. And so I was working 5 days, and then they gave me a 6th day. So I would literally, I started out midnights to 6 a.m., 19 years old. And I was on the radio and doing all that stuff. And I would finish my Friday. I would finish at Friday at 6 a.m. And then I was off Friday afternoon, Saturday. And I had to be back Sunday night to do the afternoon syndicated show, which was Charlie Tuna and Machine Gun Kelly and the fishing report. And so I had to do that on Sunday for extra money. And it sucked. I did it for a very short period of time. I remember we had these coupons in the drawer to win a free BK broiler or a BK whaler. Do you remember those sandwiches that Burger King had for a while?
Yeah.
Here I am driving in my shitty little Chevette that had no floor pans in it, that they screwed down sheet metal on top of the carpet.
No Chevettes.
And I'm driving, and I'm going through the drive-thru, and this lady at the drive-thru, she's like, "How do you keep getting these tickets? How do you keep winning this?" I'm like, "Hey man, you got to listen to Win 98.3 WLCS." You know, and I was living off of Pop-Tarts, the macaroni and cheese with the powder, ramen noodle, and those BK broilers and BK. And then I was like pulling back. I'm like, I should not do this so much. And it was fun. I did it. I loved. I look back on it, and I love that I did that. But my girlfriend was back home. All my race car buddies were back home. I still had my hot rod back home, and I'm like, this sucks, man. I don't know anybody. I'm living in an armpit. Muskegon is an armpit. It might not be today, but it was freaking armpit back then.
How long did you last out there?
90 days, dude. 90 days. And I was like, dude, I went back. I'll never forget. I called my mom. I'm like, this sucks. I'm coming home. She's like, she was devastated. She's still to this day is devastated about it. All the things I've done, even having a podcast for 12 years and going out and interviewing people like Foghat and, doing all kinds of cool stuff that I've got to do in the last 12 years or 20 years. And she's
still disappointed in you.
But her, because she spent so much money on that school. But I called and I was like, I'm coming home. I called my buddy. I'm like, dude, go get my dad's truck. Come get me. I went and told my roommate, deuces, I'm out. And I went to I remember going to the radio station, talking to the station manager, Dan Vanderhyde, who was like an old school, legendary radio guy in the tiny market. Right. So in that town, he was a big deal. And he's like, when are you leaving? I'm like, right now, dude. I didn't stay. I went home, packed my shit, and went back to Detroit and went right back to my life. I went and got a job at Super Shops. I was
Jay,
back into the car stuff.
Is this pre-opening your shop with your dad? Or
Oh yeah, this is 92.
This is 92. Yeah. So when did you officially open your first shop?
December 3rd, 2003.
2003. So right after that.
Yeah.
And take us a little bit through that, how long that lasted, and then kind of give us the transition of you coming to Florida. How did you get down to Florida? What made you give us that part of your life with the shop?
Well, okay, so from the shop forward, Florida was easy. We came down to, my dad called me from Daytona in 2003. I knew I was going to Daytona in 2004. I came down in 2004. I already had the shop. I was still working full time, so I used some vacation. Came down. I fell in love with Daytona. I mean, it was just, dirty, nasty, gritty. I loved every bit of it. And so it just kind of snowballed from there to where Daytona was, every year I went down to Daytona. Well, if you back up a little bit, the girl I was dating back in 92, I started dating her in 91. She was born in Tampa, right? Mm-hmm. She was my next door neighbor. My mother and her father had known each other since kindergarten, and her uncle was best friends with my mom's cousin. So our families had been intertwined since the early 50s, mid 50s, right? So we would come down to Florida. I married her. We're still married today. I married her in 94. Nice. We came down to Florida for our honeymoon. And as soon as we came down here, I'm like, this is way better than where we live. We should move down here. and we had just bought a house as kids. She was still in high school when I married her. I was 20. I wasn't even old enough to drink at my own wedding. She was 18. We got married, bought a house. I had my shit together. I've always had my shit together, even when I was a clown. And we bought a house, and so obviously we were kind of putting roots down there. Her whole family lived up there, except for aunts and uncles that lived in Florida. And so we came down on our honeymoon, and we just kept coming every year. And finally in 2009, when we were down here on vacation, I just decided like it was time. And I had been pushing, and Karen looked at me and she's like, if you think that this is what we need to do, I think that we need to do that. And we need to take some time to do it. And I was like, nope, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right now.
The Band-Aid.
So we went home. It took us a little less than a year, but we moved to Florida. And, I'll be fair, I was a very difficult person to deal with at work. I had a vision for what I wanted my motorcycle shop to be. And my dad and I had taken on a business partner, and I was very unaware of who he was when we did that. He's a great guy. I love him to death. He still has our shop up there. It's still going. I didn't know at the time that his dad was like VP level at Ford Motor Company. We didn't know.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Jeez.
So there was just some we were unequally yoked when it came to finances. My family was willing to be broke in order to have the bike shop,
Right.
and his family never had to be. So he got to make decisions that he wanted to make that were passionate to him.
Right.
All the tough decisions that were made by my family. And I would say this to him, like, that's the difference financially and economically, socioeconomically. My family was broke because of the bike shop. His family wasn't. His dad made a lot of money and was able to put money into the company when it was needed. And he had a fallback that I didn't have, that my parents didn't have. We didn't come from money. So that is, I don't care what anybody says, that is a monumental difference that you're not going to overcome.
Absolutely.
You can buy your way through a lot of problems if you have evaporative capital.
That's right.
And I'm not besmirching him or anything, because he'll probably hear this at some point. And he knows I love him to death. I love his dad. I love his mom. It didn't work anymore for us. He wanted a very different motorcycle shop. He wanted the motorcycle shop that he has today. I wanted the motorcycle shop that I wanted, that I have today. And so when I went and told my mom and dad we're going to move to Florida, literally my mom, my dad, my sister, her children, they packed up, and within 90 days they were down here.
What? Jeez.
That fast.
Wow.
And we sold our interest of that motorcycle shop.
Did you settle in Lakeland right away?
I did, yeah. The motorcycle shop we put in Plant City.
Mhm.
We thought that was a little more of a rural town than what it is today. They had a bike night every month. So we thought, okay, that's a great marketing tool. They're obviously biker friendly.
Yeah.
I found out that moving into that community was like putting a fish in a small bowl, right? The fish is only going to get so big in that bowl.
Yeah.
Right. And so we found out a business lesson that people that live in that town will pay more for the services that are available in that town. And people in that town also know that not every service is available in that town. So they're willing to go to other places to get service. But people that don't live in that little town do not want to come into that little town.
Yeah.
So we struggled we stayed there and we did okay, but we stayed there for 9.5 years. And then we moved to Lakeland, which is where my wife and I settled when we came down here, because it was the closest thing that we had to not being a big city, but still having everything we needed, and really great schools for my daughters.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, we're a giant shop.
Awesome, brother.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about business lessons, and that leads into the next question. For your personal development, business-wise, and specifically related to motorcycle work and industry, what do you do? What have you done as far as training, the pursuit of resources and personal growth? What have you tapped into over the years to develop your skills and knowledge?
I'm really big on that, and here's why. I think that everybody should be reading. I think men should carry a fucking pocket knife, and I think everybody should be reading a book, at least one book, all the time. Even if it takes you a year to read the same book, you should be reading. So I'm not uneducated. I am uneducated, but I'm not unintelligent. So I know how to learn. And so when I'm into something, I am in it to a point that is obsessive. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you can't. I can now, like today, I can say, listen, I don't work past 4 o'clock. I'm in 21 years. I have staff. If I'm going to make that decision to not work past 4 o'clock, I can do that. Like that, I have that right. I've earned that. I've earned that entitlement.
Yeah.
But as far as personal growth, read. So I read a lot, and I read stuff. I make marks in the book. I highlight the book, and I teach. I know how to teach. I was a high school auto shop teacher, and so I understand how to, the I do, we do, you do principle. So, and I have been through so much training. All those companies that I worked for have, one of the most brilliant things that I've ever taken away was the fact that they trained me. And, training, you get whatever you want out of training. If you want to be a heavy lifter, start lifting heavy weights. If you want really good cardio, start running. Right. So, you can do both of those activities go on in the same gym. You got some, meathead in the corner slamming plates on, and you got some, little tiny dude that's got the metabolism of a bird that guy will never catch.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you can get whatever you want out of a situation. So I do the maze backwards. I am obsessed with knowing things about what I'm doing. I don't want to ever be the smartest man in the room. Because if you're the smartest dude in the room, you're in the wrong room. Get out of there as fast as you can. Be kind, be nice, light the room up as long as you can, but get out. Go find somewhere where you're probably not even close to the smartest guy in the room, and that's how you're going to do. So
that's how you learn.
I talk about socioeconomic things. Like I tell both of my daughters this. I'm like, go get some rich friends that are older than you. Go find a couple that is 10 years older than you that are rich, and make friends with them and watch them. Don't ever ask them to borrow any money.
Right.
None of that stuff. Don't try to compete with them. Don't try to take the check. None of that shit, because none of that works. That's meaningless. You go out to dinner. I have a very funny story I'll tell you about going out to dinner with people, but and it involves the motorcycle community. But go find, and that's what I did. And I tell all young people that. Like I have some friends that are wealthy, and they're some of the best friends we've ever had. I would never ask them to borrow money. We have dinner, and they're so close to us. They're like family, right? And then in hanging out with them, they have friends that are more wealthy. They do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like that's what like you. I want to glean something from the conversation. I don't need to be so smart that I'm trying to have a conversation. I have a friend who's a congressman in Georgia. I won't say his name, but I'm not going to tell him anything about politics.
Right.
But I listen to everything that he says about politics, even if I don't agree with him. Right. I have a friend that's into finance. I don't know about finance, but I know a guy. Right. So, I mean, don't try to be smarter than anybody. Try to learn from people. And that's what I do. So training is important. All those weird trainings that I went to learn how to sell a lease on a used car. I take something, there's a takeaway from everything I do. And Super Shops was the first company I worked for that did training. And Super Shops isn't in business anymore. And it's a shame, because they should teach a class at Harvard Business School about Harry Eberlin and what Harry Eberlin did. If you don't know who Harry Eberlin is, Harry Eberlin started selling wheels out of the back of a 63 Ford Falcon at drag strips. And when he was done, he owned Mallory ignition, Urson cams. He bought more BF Goodrich tires than anybody on the planet except for General Motors. Had 165 stores, a trucking company, a construction company.
All out of the back of his trunk, man. That's amazing.
He started out of the back of his Falcon, and he pioneered a lot of things. He unfortunately took his own life about 10, 12 years ago, or 15 years ago, and it's very sad.
It's amazing, right? Because you can have everything you want, and you can reach every goal
you don't
want,
have shit.
but you don't have shit if you're bad.
This guy had
mental health.
He had an F40 Ferrari and an F50 Ferrari, and to get an F50, you had to own an F40. He had a Ferrari on the wall of his house.
Jeez,
I mean, this dude had a lot of money, but at the end, he stopped evolving. Yeah. This is the lesson. He stopped evolving. He stopped innovating. He started manufacturing comfort for himself in his life. He lost his wife of many years, married an 18-year-old, got her pregnant, was building a house on the mountainside in La Jolla, California, lost 165 stores, I could go on for hours about this guy, the arc of where it is and the hockey stick growth that he had. But there's a lot to be gleaned from that and a lot to be taken from that on both sides of what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to answer your question is I don't ever stop learning. I'm not done. DP says that they're going to find him dead next to a hoist. They're going to find me dead somewhere at work. I don't have a retirement plan.
Yeah.
I'd like to spend less time here and more time traveling because I love that, but that's learning.
That's learning.
You bring up a good point, Jason, about the continuing education, personal development. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're pursuing something that is specifically set up for that type of thing, like a school or courses or whatever. You're implementing those practices in your daily life by who you surround yourself with. So you're constantly gaining knowledge and insight into where you want to be. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and the idea that someone that's younger than you doesn't know what they're talking about, that's
garbage.
BS too.
Yeah.
Go hire somebody who's 20 years younger than you to do something at your job that's mundane at first, and then give them opportunities inside, and you're going to find out that I have a guy that works for me that came in and organized. I've been in business 21 years. Do you know how many used parts I have?
Sure.
Well, every single one of those parts is tagged, bagged, labeled, and listed online for sale now in a matter of 90 days because I hired somebody who understood technology.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was something I wasn't able to do, right? I don't have to learn it because I know him, but he can teach me how things work so that I can, so I can regurgitate that. It's just, don't be the smartest person in the room. Get out of that room if you are.
That kind of leads us nicely into the next thing we want to talk about. And that's basically CycleStop, your shop in Lakeland. Obviously, a lot of people who follow you and understand you, they see the bikes you build, the products that you put out there. But one of the things we take a lot of pride in on this podcast is we like to talk about the grind that goes into everything else as far as opening up the business, hiring a team, the amount of hours put in. So my question is really more like, take us a little bit into some pivotal moments in building your business, number one, and the obstacles that small businesses that have motorcycle shops, because I've had a motorcycle shop down here for 20 years too, that we go through, because I think that's a very important part for anybody who's looking to do this, to understand some of the things, the challenges. Obviously, there's a lot of great things because you're chasing your passion and you're doing what you love, but take us a little bit into that part of your world.
Well, I'll start with the worst advice I've ever gotten in business, right? I had an accountant when we had JR Cycle Works up in Detroit. Our accountant told me never turn down money. And that is the worst business advice that I ever got.
Yeah,
it really is. So in a nutshell, I looked at what we were doing as far as, and to be fair, the bike shop in Michigan we have never hit the numbers that we hit in Michigan, ironically enough. My thought process, I'm moving somewhere where there's 12-month riding season. Right. I've never hit those numbers. So I looked at what we did at our shop in Michigan, and I was like, okay, where do I see people the most often, right? They come in for an annual service, which is something that we, no one calls it an annual but us, but everybody does a 3-hole.
Right.
Our 3-hole is just a little bit more invasive, right? We give you a little bit more value, we feel. We put it in writing. We have this very, unique kind of branded safety inspection worksheet that you get a copy of. We keep a copy. So I sat down and I looked at tires, brakes, batteries, oil change, maintenance, those things that can be done with a 1 hour appointment in 1 hour or less per service, right? So you come in for a tire, it's 1 hour or less. You need brakes, it's 1 hour or less. Now you're here 2 hours, And so I built a menu. Yeah. And you know who Russell Mitchell is from Exile? Yeah. So I was a dealer of his a long time ago for parts and stuff. And I was looking at one of the things that either came in the dealer kit or was on his website was he had these codes, and it was LB1, LB2, LB3. And it was LB1 is, this service. LB2 is this service. So I was like, okay. So, I stole the LB codes and I built this menu. LB1 is an oil change. LB2 is an annual service. LB3, all the way down the line, because numbers are infinite.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I created this code, this labor thing, and I went to my business partner and I said, listen, I want to change kind of the business model that we're in. And I want to create something that's more replicable and is more branded and is more corporate looking.
Yeah.
And he looked at everything. He said, yeah, I don't want anything to do with that. I want a greasy floor, greasy shop, greasy bikes, greasy hands. Like that was his deal.
Okay.
And I don't besmirch him for that. Right.
Yeah.
So that was not what I wanted. So I had decided we were going to move to Florida, and I was still at JR Cycle Works for a while, and I used to do Wednesday night rides. When I left at work at 6:30, if you were there and you wanted to go for a ride with me, you go for a ride. Sometimes I'd have 2 guys, sometimes I'd have no guys, sometimes I'd have 10 guys.
That's cool.
There's a guy named Rob Jankowski that kept coming in all the time, and that I was working on his bike. And this night on a Wednesday night, we rode out to Ann Arbor. It was just he and I were in a bar in Ann Arbor having a beer, having a burger, and we're talking. And I told him that I was moving to Florida. And he said, "What are you going to do in Florida?" And I told him about the menu services. I was going to create a company called CycleStopUSA that was a dealership alternative for service that specialized in 1 hour services or less, with a menu like a Starbucks or a Tire Kingdom or Tires Plus, that kind of thing, where you knew what you were getting when you came in, right? It was straight up. And I said I wanted to open 5 stores in 5 years. I wanted to franchise it. I wanted to go through the SEC document process and all this stuff. And I had some really wealthy people in my life that had wanted to work with me. And we never landed on anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was like, "I want to do this. How can I do this?" I'm like, I don't know. You're a customer. I didn't say this, but I'm in my head. I'm like, "You're a customer. I'm not going to ask you for money." So I said, I don't know, man. I haven't gotten that far yet. He said, "Well, when you get that far, let me know." Well, I was in the throes of Evan. My business partner had already told me he had no interest in it. I had already decided I was going to move to Florida. So the writing was on the wall. I didn't stop crafting this plan. I just didn't tell anybody else about it. Yeah. Well, this guy kept calling me like every couple of days, like, "Hey, listen, what about this? Have you thought of this? Can you do this? Can you do that?" And he told me, he goes, "Listen," he goes, "I'm an oncologist." He was the guy at Merck Labs that was in charge of 100% of all the oncology sales, distribution, and discovery. Right.
He's doing all right.
He was a big guy at Merck.
Yeah.
His wife had the same kind of career at another company. So he goes, "Look, all my friends are doctors. We all have a lot of money." He goes, "I want to do this. What is it going to take?" And I said, "Listen, it's going to take $250." And I'm telling you this so that if someone that hears this, they understand the undercapitalization versus overcapitalization.
Yep.
So, and so I'm going to go into detail, but it'll be worth it when I come back around. So I said, I need $250. Here's what I want to do. I want to open a store in Michigan. I want to rent a building real cheap. I just want to put it together. I want to create the company. I want to be able to, I had just seen that movie, The Founder.
Yep.
I'm like, I want to be able to walk people in and go, "This is what a cycle stop looks like. This is what you get for $25,000. I had set up to where you could open a franchise for $25,000 because I didn't have SEC approval from the Security Exchange Commission, and I didn't have franchise documents. It was done under a licensing agreement.
Okay.
Right. So I would license you for $5,000 a year, and to make things easy on you, I would be your distributor. So I would deal with Drag.
Smart.
I would deal with Biker's Choice.
Super
I would
smart.
deal with Hard Drive, wasn't around then, but I would deal with all the distributors, and I would make sure that here's your list of parts that you need.
Yep.
Here's the list of equipment you need. Here's the list of tools you need. We built these toolboxes. We built everything.
Yeah, so it's attractive.
And people would come we would bring investors into this shop, and they would see what a motorcycle shop was like. Well, a couple things happened that I didn't anticipate. Number one, I opened to the public so that I had some stuff going on, and instantly the shop was full, like overnight.
Wow.
It was full.
Really?
Jeez.
Yeah. Like turning on a light switch.
Shit.
So that was unexpected, because that's not what I had that shop there for. And we started bringing investors through. We had a lot of people that were super interested in this idea. Well, one of the guys that I had dealt with at the other shop, who had always wanted to go into business with me, he said, "Listen, if you ever want to go into business with yourself, just for yourself, with somebody else, let me know." Him and his father had written, they had owned a huge software company and sold it, and had lots of zeros in their bank account.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it was several $100 million. And he was an entrepreneur and wanted to keep doing, and so he was buying franchises. And so I never presented this to him until I had everything kind of together. And I had him come over, and I was like, "Look, this is what I want to do." And he's like, "This is brilliant." And I was like, "Well, this is how much money I need." And he's like, "Okay." He goes, "What are you going to do with this store here in Plymouth, Michigan?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to box everything up. I'm going to take it to Florida. That'll be my first store. And I already have enough money to open a second store. And my goal was to open 5 stores in 5 years, plus a DC, sell off 20% of the stores, right? So I'd own 1 store. I'd have the DC, and every day there'd be somebody who would drive to all 5 stores and deliver tires, brakes, all the shit that they need, plus the special orders, right, for their customers.
Napa man.
We'd have kind of a supercharged cycle gear that actually did stuff on bikes, right?
Yeah.
You'd hire a mechanic that just did tires, brakes, batteries, oil change, maintenance. He loved it. He goes, I'm not going to fund that. He goes, I'm going to buy this store in Michigan. I want a contract from you
cool.
that I get first right of refusal of any store in Michigan and Hawaii.
Kill it. Yeah, wow.
He goes, you go down and open 5 stores. I will fund 100% of the rest of the company growth.
Really?
Wow.
Nationwide.
Wow.
So he definitely
goes,
liked it.
So he really liked it. But he goes, I'm going to buy this store. He goes, I'm going to give you got 25 grand in the store. You say that's what the stores cost. I'm going to give you $25,000. I'm not going to give you $25,000 in one go. I'm going to give you $8,500 and I'm going to pay you every month. Okay. Now we had gone to a computer company and bought a terminal that had all of our stuff in it. Right. And it processed all your, it was designed for a salon. So you go and you have haircut, color, shampoo, they're going to buy some hair gel, all that stuff. So we had, we had a company develop.
A point of sale?
It was a point of sale, but it was all one touch, right? Touch Suite was the name of the company. They're based in Florida.
Yeah.
So we got that for our first store. And then they built a program for us that allowed the motor. We just took out the haircut and put in oil change, took out the hair gel and put in the oil. So it was turnkey. This guy inherited it or bought a turnkey store. So I told the Rob guy, who he went and got his wife and 2 of his friends, and they were going to put in 250. We were going to come down here and build 5 stores. Well, they didn't anticipate this guy was going to buy this store this quick. So we let him buy it. He's running it. Everything's going good. I moved down here to Florida. I opened the Plant City location. They put 185 in. Okay. So you kind of have to do some math. They pledged 250. They put 185 in. The first store was 25. So now I have 160, right? I have 160 in the bank. I open a second store down here. Now I have 135 in the bank. Then in February, they say, this guy's going to steal our idea, the VC. Now, in order to do this, I had to sell off my rights to the company. I was a 4% shareholder. I went from 100% idea of the intellectual property down to a 4%. And every year that we were in business, I was going to get 5% back to where I was 20. We were going to be 20, 20, 20, 20, and 20, right? Sorry about that. We were going to be 20, 20, 20, 20, and 20. When that happened, I had to give up all but 4% ownership, right? So I was I was the CEO of the company, but I was paid. And I was sitting at the table with Rob and his wife, and she says, I want to make sure you understand something. We're going to pay you a $60,000 a year salary, and I will defend your salary to the shareholders till the last dollars is in the account. I said, okay. So I moved down here. Now we go down to 135. This guy that they want to tell to piss off, they're like, he's going to steal our idea. I'm like, he's not going to steal our idea. This guy he showed me the plans. He hired an architectural firm to design ground up CycleStopUSA. It's like, this guy was all in, in for a penny, in for a pound. He was going to open, he was moving the location. He was having a building built that was going to be the flagship CycleStopUSA with the glass and the waiting room and the coffee machine and all this stuff. This dude was throwing major cash into it, right? And then they're like, we got to get it back from him. Man. So I had to call him and tell him, listen, dude, they think you're going to steal it. Blah, blah, blah. He's like, okay, man. Like, he was still to this day, I don't have a relationship with this guy over this. And he goes, I'm not giving it back. You're giving me every penny plus then. Right. So now I had 130 in the bank. Right. So I had to give him 85 or 8,500. Right. Plus some other, he had to buy the Salon Pro machine. That was another like $8,000. Now I'm down. I'm teetering at about 115 in the bank. Right now, the store here costs $8,500 a month to run. So every month, 85. They keep the store in Michigan open. I had to hire somebody up there. That's 85. So now I'm bleeding 17,000 a month.
Holy shit.
Right. It was just going like this. And I'm like, you're not even giving me an opportunity. I don't know anybody in Florida in the motorcycle business. And I certainly I don't even know any humans that ride motorcycles in Plant City, Florida. Like, you're not giving me an opportunity to get this thing going. And you haven't put the 250 that you said you were going to put in. So I need the other money. I need the other, $65,000 or $75,000 that you said you were going to give that you didn't give yet. I need that money. And these guys were like, no, we're not putting any more money in this. You're just losing money. I'm like, yeah, that's what you do is you lose money when you open a business.
Exactly.
Dumb. You had somebody who was already paying for things up here. And then you cut my legs off from under me. And so they come down we do this open house deal in September. We open April 2nd. We come down, we're doing okay. I mean, I had business right off the rip. It was a small shop. It was exactly what we wanted. I mean, people will walk in and go, is this a franchise? I'm like, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I hit the mark.
What you want to hear.
Right. But so I'm running out of money. They come down Labor Day and they're like, listen, everything's going to be fine. We're going to get here. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, great. They go home. The lease is up October 1st on the store in Michigan because we'd only got it for 1 year just so we could try to get investors interested, right? I get a phone call from the guy down there. He's like, hey, man, Rob and Jody are here. They just closed the shop. So they call my employee here. They make my employee fly home. So that costs money. Rent a U-Haul truck, put everything in that shop down into this shop. So now I'm like Noah's Ark. I got 2 of everything. I got
Holy cow.
2 sets of hoists, 2 tire machines. And inventory was not set up for Harley. It was set up for motorcycles, 10 years old and newer. So I had 170, 80, 15 tires and 170 tires I had never sold because I was a Harley shop in Michigan. And then that was October 1st. November 1st, they're like, hey, will you take a pay cut? I was like, no. You told me that you would defend my salary to the nth degree. You haven't put the rest of the money in. You leave me down here. I'm dying on the vine. Right. Well, I'm not dumb. I saw the writing on the wall. And I had spoken at a motorcycle safety school. Somebody asked me to speak there. And when I was speaking there, one of the guys was an auto shop teacher at a town over. And he's like, dude, come talk to my kids. So I go and talk to his kids one day. It was just to get him out of a lesson plan, And when I was done, he's like, you should be a teacher. I'm like, bro, I haven't ever been to college. He's like, it doesn't matter in Florida. You can go off your life experience. And there's a school that needs an automotive teacher 45 minutes away. So I call them, talk to them. That's a whole nother story. I end up getting that job. So they do cut my pay. They cut my pay down to $200 a week. They call me in December, right before the end of in between Christmas and New Year's. Now, mind you, now I'm teaching high school full-time, an hour away. And then I'm coming home. So my day starts at 5 a.m. I get to the school. School starts at 7 a.m. I leave school at 2:45. I drive back to the motorcycle shop, stay there till 6:30, 7 o'clock. Come home. I still have 2 kids that are young in school. Do their homework with them. Grade all my papers from school. Pass out and do it every day. Wash, rinse, repeat.
Right. Yeah.
Wash, rinse,
how
repeat.
long?
The
For
only
how long?
solace I had is that. Well, so that was right off the rip. That's how I'm going. And the only solace I had is I had a week off at Thanksgiving and 2 weeks off at Christmas that were all paid because it was a teacher. And that was cool. Being a teacher was one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life. So anyway, so they call me in between Christmas and New Year's. They're like, listen, we want to close the company. One of the investors named Doc, he wants to put this on this year's loss. I was like, screw you. No, absolutely not. I'm not helping with any of that. I'm not doing none of that. And I said, I'm not somebody's write-off. I've already been down that road before. You guys you still have never put the money in. I've got to go out and get a job. You're screwing me here. Cool. So right after the first of the year, they call me and they're like, do you think we can sell it? And I was like, for what? You haven't even been in business a year down here. No one knows who you are. It's going to look, it's
going to look shady. Yeah.
If you had opened 3 stores in the first year, like we were gonna, we could package that up and sell it, because 3 stores, we would have had an advertising budget. We would have been moving things around and enough people would have known. I mean, somebody would have walked in and wanted to do that, and it would have been a viable business. Right. And they're like, do you think we can get 85 for it? I'm like, 85 what? She's 85,000. I go, you're out of your mind. There's no chance. There's no chance. So they sold it to some dude in Plant City for nothing. He just took over the responsibility, right? Closed the company, closed the original company. And I ended up being a part-time employee of CycleStopUSA like a year in. And now I'm teaching high school. I told this guy who bought the company, I'm like, yeah, I'll come here. I'm already coming here every day. I'll help. I don't want to screw you. These people have already, you want to make it work. I still want a bike shop, So 6 months later, I bought it from him with a business partner who was not somebody I would have picked as a business partner. It was our employee, who ironically enough had been an employee of mine at the dealership. It was just a long story, but I didn't know he moved to Florida. He didn't know I moved to Florida. We reconnected, and he ended up needing a job and working for me. And
was he a mechanic?
No, he was a thief.
He was a thief.
I still have the folder. It might even be here in my desk of all he wrote down. You ever seen Dumb and Dumber, where they fucking spend all that
IOUs?
money and they write IOUs? I have all his IOUs
that
in his own
Lamborghini.
handwriting.
You're going to want to hold on to that one.
Yeah, you're going to want to hold. That one's a good one. Yeah. So I still have all. I'm going to have them framed one of these days of all the money he stole. But long story short, I bought it
How the
back.
hell
I
you still
taught
have
for
all
40.
your hair? I have no idea.
All right. I bought the company back. My mom and dad helped me run it. I taught for a total of 3 years there. I taught 10, 11, 11, 12, 12, 13. I built the school out there. I got everything going. That school program's still real strong. But I came down here to be a bike shop owner. And so in 13, I turned in my resignation at the school, which was really tough for me. It was really tough for them. I mean, they had a lot of stock in me.
That's brutal.
So,
That's
so my answer is to that is like, listen, all money's not good money, even if it's clean money, and know who you're getting into business with, because it's super important. Right. And don't give up. You know, I still make mistakes. I kind of have to. That's how you learn. But, they never put their money. And then they had the audacity to call me the following year and ask me to put in for the tax benefit, the tax bill. I was like, pound sand. I'm like, you took 96% away the ownership. I go, I'll give you 4% of what you owe. I go, but I'm Barry Sanders. Like, you just give me the ball and I run with it. It's not you were the money people, and you didn't put the money in that we wouldn't be in this situation if you're not. So piss off. Right. And I told him to piss off, and we're not friends anymore, and I'm okay with that.
What a story.
Like, I guess we were never friends.
That's insane.
Yeah, man.
What an idea.
That's business.
No, I know, man. I've gone through it too. Well, what an incredible idea that was too. What a shame, because that could have been really special for something like that.
And it still might be. I mean, I still have a menu, and we still have the ride in, ride out stuff.
But you're only one, I learned a lot. You're only one right now.
Yeah,
with the Lakeland shop.
And I learned about market apathy. I learned about missing the mark completely on your target audience. Like I thought, back then, I was doing so much research. I was looking in the Motorcycle Industry Council, and they're like, women are the fastest growing segment of the marketplace. They're the most underserved. So we tailored a lot of stuff towards women. And I found out that women don't want to be treated like women when they're on a Harley.
Yeah. Right.
Oddly enough, they want to be treated like one of the dudes. And so we missed the mark on a lot of marketing, because I thought, shit, man, I like women too. I don't care if they ride. Like, my wife doesn't ride because she doesn't want to. And so there's a lot of broy chicks out there that we missed the mark on, so
broy chicks. So next chapter. Thanks for giving us the details on that. That's a fascinating
story. Great story, man.
I know that was long and arduous to get through.
That's an important part of life, man. That's a history changing in your life. So it's very good. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Hey guys, the show will be back in 1 minute right after a word from our sponsor.
Hey, One Gang, tired of feeling like your butt's taking more of a beating than your bike on those long rides? Introducing Butt Buffer, the ultimate solution to saddle soreness. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. These cushions are made from medical-grade viscoelastic polymer, scientifically crafted to eliminate pressure points and keep your circulation flowing. No more numb nuts or numb butts. And here's the best part. Butt Buffer cushions are made right here in the U.S. for the last 30 years. From Harleys to Hondas, we've got a cushion to fit your ride perfectly. Plus, with styles ranging from sleek pebble polymer to luxurious sheepskin, there's a Butt Buffer for every rider's style. Get your Butt Buffer today at buttbuffer.com. That's buttbuffer.com. Your butt will thank you, and you'll ride longer and happier. We've got your butt covered.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next chapter, let's talk about the Garage Built podcast. What inspired you to start that, and how has it evolved since, you started it in 2012?
So I started another podcast in 2011. I had never heard a podcast, and then I saw Joe Rogan do his deal, and I think he started his in 2010 or 2011,
something like that.
I don't recall exactly when it was, but it was just him and his buddy sitting there in front of a camera talking shit. And so the guy that I was business partners with, the guy that I was business partners with was really interested in the guy that ended up taking the money. He was really interested in he wanted to be a politician, oddly enough. And now he's a children's book author. But he wanted to be a politician. And so he was really into politics as a hobby. And so we would talk all the time about it. And I was like, so we started a podcast called The Bottom Feed. And what we would do is just find news things and talk about, like, I'm a dum-dum. He kind of thought he knew what he was talking about. So between him having an idea of what should happen and how how to unpack things for it, and me just being able to be, kind of funny and talk shit.
Yeah.
I was able to we were able to bounce off each other. So we started a podcast called The Bottom Feed, and it was on Ustream, and it was cool. We did a bunch of times, and it was really fun. And then I started doing the audio podcast because I could take it on the road with me. So I would travel back to, what I would do is how I started is I went back to Michigan and I'd call up my friends and try to explain to them what I was going to do. And I'm like, look, basically we're going to have a conversation. We're going to talk into microphones and I'm going to record it and then I'm going to edit it and then I'm going to put it out for other people to hear. So we're going to talk about not personal things about you and me, but we're going to talk about things that are funny stories or, historical things. So it started that way. And I did 10 episodes and then I didn't do it for like 8 years.
Really?
I was like, but I always paid to keep them live. So they would re-aggregate.
Right.
And then in 2016, I think I did one and then I did like 4 or 5 and then I did 10 the next year. And then I don't know, we're over 100 episodes, but it's not. During COVID, I was doing a lot and I actually made some money doing it.
Nice.
And I think COVID, everybody was kind of scared. Like we have to support these podcasts because we're not going to these events and we have to try to lift up. And then the same thing happens is, this, we work in the tiniest $1 billion industry. Nobody has any money. No one has any real, the people that have any real money, there's no reason to give it away because they already made it without all that stuff. And I hate to be shitty about it, but I have really good relationships with a lot of people. And during COVID, I did really well with the podcast. And I thought, this is something that I could envision myself. I wanted a van and I was going to outfit the back of it with, a podcast studio and I was going to, go on the road and I was like, if I can cover my expenses and make a couple grand a month and, I won't do it all the time, but I'll go for a week and I'll hit Tennessee, then I'll go up to Georgia go to Tennessee and then I'll go over to St. Louis and talk to Paul at Bare Knuckle. And then I'll go down to Texas, talk to Jace and Cody and Xavier in Texas and maybe Rick Farrell, do those kind of trips, come back with 6 or 7 of them, release them once every week. And then COVID got over with and the bike shop problems came back that are there before, during COVID, we were banging.
Too. Us too.
Mm-hmm. We couldn't sell enough. We couldn't get enough tires to sell. We couldn't get enough lifters to change cams. We couldn't, I think that thing was the biggest purge in our industry. We got so many dusty parts off of shelves and then the motorcycles.
That saved the industry, in my opinion. I know it's sad to say, but that saved the industry. I mean, it saved all the small shops because everybody started getting their bikes would they never ride no longer because they're busy working. Now they got this free time. They're bringing the bike to the shop. You're doing service. You're getting them out on the road. So, I mean, I believe it saved the small shops.
It created a false sense of security for a lot of bike shop owners, though. Yep. And a lot of people that weren't in business, in 2008 and 2006, when shit hit the fan the first time, I was in this industry.
Me too.
And 25%, well, more than that. I mean, only 20% of the bike shops that were around me back then made it out right through that. And so you have all these guys, this is a very easy industry to get in. You got a credit card and a cool haircut. Back then, if you had a credit card, a wallet chain, and, a credit card was enough to build a fucking bike. And you had a wallet chain and a Dickies jacket and some sideburns.
Yes.
And you could be in the industry. You couldn't stay in the industry. I was that kid.
Just walk into any Harley dealership. They all look the same.
Yeah. And I was that kid. I'll be honest with you. I saw Discovery Channel. And I was like,
me too. I
can do that. And I started doing that. And I was like, fuck, this works. And then everybody peels off and I'm like, where did everybody go? I thought we were going to be bros. I call them dude bros. They're like Bike Week friends. Only see them at Bike Week. And I have a great time with them at Bike Week, but they're not my friends. A lot of them aren't my friends away from Bike Week. I mean, I know guys now I've known for 20 years that I met Bike Week 20 years ago that we're real tight but that's because we've known each other 20. I have an old saying that a dog is a man's best friend because they only live 10 years. Because any friend you have that you've known more than 10 years still knows something about you that you'd rather they didn't still know. Right. A dog is a friend you can have murdered, the COVID thing and how much business we did was a false sense of security where there's a lot of guys that were e-com only that are not here anymore. I mean, I've seen just as many people fall off this time as I saw fall off last time. And it's okay. The thing that I hate about it is it's so easy to get here and so hard to stay here that I mean, we see through bullshit because we've seen it so many times that there's a lot of guys, you see them come in the room, boy, they got shiny teeth and shiny watch and new wallet chain and
brand new jacket,
you're
brand new
like,
boots.
you're like, yeah, come on in, man. We'll let you buy us beer all night long, sucker. Yeah, man. You want to buy parts from me? Yeah, I'll sign you up as a dealer. And they spend 10 grand, 20 grand, whatever.
Yep.
And they get the trailer with all the letters on the side and the dually and their wife with the big lips and the big tits. And, and then they run out of cool and they go home and he has to go back to, doing whatever it was that, being a roofing. He don't make roofing contractor money anymore in the bike business. So the lady with the big lips and big tits is not, she's like, look, I'm accustomed to a few things.
That's right.
A woman that'll stay through a guy that's in the motorcycle industry, a woman that'll hang out for the long haul. That's a gangster right there. That's the gangster in the relationship.
Yeah.
Cause I'm telling you, there's times where I'm like, I'm going to put a bullet in my brain,
I know.
and my wife is right there going like, you're going to be fine. Quit being a pussy,
Hey, any memorable interviews that stuck with you through your podcast days that like just something maybe really hit home or a great story was there? I'm sure there's a lot because us doing this, we get a chance to meet and talk to different people with different stories. Anything out there that really kind of hits home?
Well, I mean, to be fair, the ones that stick out are the ones that didn't go so well. And I've never pissed anybody off or anything. I don't navigate those waters. I had some pretty important people on there. I have the luxury of one of my best friends is a professional musician and a bike builder who has the best stories in the world. So I've had him on a couple times. Xavier Muriel from Providence Cycle Works. People who don't know, he was the drummer during Buck Cherry's big, the big 14-year run they had with Crazy Bitch and Sorry and all those. So he and I are, he's one of my best friends in the world. So there's all those things that happen. That's one of those guys that we're not telling the stories of what happens off the air, on the air. We're just telling like an anecdote. But I would say that if I was to tell somebody, listen, man, you want to hear a really good podcast? I did one with Jeff Cochran the first season. The very first podcast I ever did was with a guy named Danny Murphy. And I was talking earlier about how different the motorcycle scene is in Detroit from anywhere else in the globe. And it really is. And Danny was the boss of 2 different clubs that he's got some great insight into that. And, that's a very interesting one. I told you I got to interview Foghat. That was cool.
That's awesome.
Stuff like that. I get plugged in, if you're around long enough, there's people that I want to have on the podcast that I haven't had yet. But I've had DP, I haven't had Corey and Ness on yet. He and I are buddies, but there's some good podcasts out there. Jeff Holt and Cody Childress. Like Cody Childress is a sleeper cell. He's another one of my guys. He's one of my best friends in the whole world, and he's one of the best bike builders in my opinion in the whole world. And he doesn't build a lot of bikes because he doesn't do it for a living. He used to, but when the crash happened, he was able to sell his shop, and he had 2 little girls. And he says, "Listen, I'll be back." And every once in a while he'll drop in, he'll parachute in and bring a freaking banger to an FXR show or something. And in 2016, he cleaned house. He won every single show in Sturgis. They didn't have the King of Sturgis back then. He would have got it. But every show that bike went in, it's just like boom, 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 boom. It was on. They put it on stage at the Buffalo Chip in front of 20,000 people. He's just, and Cody's kind of aw shucks when he's out in public because he's not a very vocal guy. But things like that. Like those are the kind of podcasts that I really like. Everybody, Senior and I are friends, Paul, and he wants to be on the podcast, and I want to have him on the podcast. But I want to have him on the podcast. I don't want to hear about slamming doors and all that American soccer bullshit. Yeah. I don't want to hear about there's so many rumors about guy that are so untrue. And here's what I'll tell you: I don't know anybody who likes motorcycles more than him. I know some that like it as much as him, but there isn't anybody that likes it more than him. He's like he gives a shit less about anything, like going to Sturgis or he likes being on TV because it pays a lot of money.
Of
yeah.
But he comes to my shop all the time, and he comes to the house and hangs out and eats fish because he doesn't eat meat. And stuff like that. But that's kind of stuff I want to talk about. Like, a lot of people, he's a vegetarian,
right?
And they think he's 6 feet tall. He's not. He comes up to about here on me. I mean, he's still yoked. He's 75 and still yoked. He power lifts, but he's just he's a funny old man.
That's cool.
When it really comes down to it.
That's cool, bro. That's
funny.
cool. Thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah.
So Jason, this is a fun one. What piece of advice would you give as a business owner and a content creator to somebody who's just getting started out? They want to start a business or a podcast. What are your gems that you've got in that brain of yours?
First of all, if you want to do it, do it. Like, I'm not the guy that's going to tell you it's going to be the hardest. Doesn't matter what it is. Be obsessed. If I give somebody one piece of advice, be obsessed. Be obsessed. If you're not doing it so much and so hard and so inappropriately at certain times, when I mean inappropriate, like, looking at your phone at dinner kind of shit.
Right.
If you're not going to do that, don't even bother. You're going to be halfway in. Like, to tell you very quickly, like, I bought a bike in March to December. I opened a bike shop. Right.
Yeah.
And when we opened that bike shop, it was game on. And I can remember my mom, watching me, because that was the first time she had ever watched me work. And she's like, how do you know all of this stuff already? I'm like, I don't. What I do know is how to learn it. And so I went home, and back then the Drag Specialties catalog didn't have prices in it. And thank God it's not going to, this new one that's coming out is not going to prices either. But, so I just sat there and poured over the pages and learned the nomenclature, the 0630 dash bop, bop, bop. And I knew the 0630, that's a drag brand. And I knew that there's a numbering system that happens in all these companies that I learned how to unpack that when I worked for Ram Charters, because they were an auto parts store too. And they had, 3 catalog racks tall that had no pictures. Right. It was just all numbers. So you had to learn nomenclature and how the part numbers broke down. And so I was able to glean that information. And if you're not going to be obsessed, it's like, you ever hear somebody say, like, a lot of people that are famous, they're like, if you're not, if you're doing, I think it's Jesse that said it, was like, if people recognize what you're doing, you're not doing it right. It's like, no, man, that's not true. You have to do it so much that people think you're out of your flipping mind. Right. My wife is constantly bitching at me for being on my phone. I'm like, dude, this is part of what I do for a living. This is how, I have never paid for a single follower. I don't advertise my business here. I think it's a waste of, I think advertising your business is a waste of money in this business. I think the best thing I can do is do a good job and ask for a referral, right? Because otherwise, it's just like in your podcast business. You should be asking your guests, and I don't do this, I'm bad about this. Ask your guests, hey, who do you think we should have on? Who should I contact, right? It's like, I ask people here, like, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you leave me an accurate Google review? Not a 5-star. Leave me an accurate. If you're going to give me 3 stars, cool. I respond to all of them. We'll unpack that later. But give me an accurate Google review. Yeah. Because you want to show up on Google, you can spend $1 billion on Google, and you're not going to show up in front of the closest business to you that has a 5-star rating. Right. It's not going to happen. That's the way the algorithm's populated. So be obsessed. If you're not obsessed, I tell my employees here, like, listen, man, this isn't a job. You're working in the motorcycle industry. You're working for, and I have to be careful, because I'm not egotistical to a point to where I think I'm better than anybody, but I am egotistical to a point where there's not many people that are better at what I do than me. Yeah. And so I tell them all the time, like, listen, I've worked for 21 years to have the reputation that I have. There was rooms when I first started in this business, man. I remember standing there in circles, and in a circle at the V-Twin Expo, and there's Kevin from Big Bear, and there's Kendall Johnson and Kano and Paul and Billy Lane and Dave Perry, all like kind of standing in a circle. Right. And I'm standing just outside of that circle, and I'm listening to everything that they say. And at some point in time, you're there, you become part of the landscape enough to where that circle just kind of opens up, and you kind of blip. Yeah. You're still not talking, you're listening. Unless you're an asshole, then, right. It goes back to being the smartest person in the room. Right. It's just shut up and listen. You'll learn everything you need to learn about how to be socially cognizant of your surroundings, right? You don't have to be the funniest person in the room all the time, because that gets arduous if you're around that person. You're like, dude, stop. Like, we like you, there's a couple dudes that I'm around quite a bit that I'm like, dude, listen, it's just me. Like, stop.
Yeah.
You don't have to, you're already here. So stop.
Right.
And so there's not a room literally at this point in time in this phone. You're probably one number away from every single CEO. Like, I can call somebody and get the number of the CEO of every single person in this industry. I think they say there's 1,500 total, like manufacturers in our V-twin industry, and there's like 3,000 shops. Well, Dunbar's number is 153 of how many people you can actually know and remember their names, right? So it's less than 10%, but it's 10% of literally of the companies. And I think, there's not a room that if I walked into, they wouldn't be like, hey. And they're like, oh, that's Jason, fine, whatever. And that's not a brag thing. That's like, I tell my guys that work for me, I'm like, I've worked for that. Like, you can have that
right.
too. It's
Right.
free.
Right.
It's literally free. It's, I tell my employees, do the easy stuff first. Come into work on time. Clean up.
Right.
Clean under your fingernails. Brush your freaking teeth. If you're gonna wear a beard, oil it. If you're from Florida and you get that weird beard that doesn't grow all the way, clean it up. During COVID, I would have my barber come here and clean all my guys up.
Nice.
That's
Put them,
cool.
sit down, line them up. Like, do your eyebrows, clean the hair out of your ears. Like,
that's really cool.
that stuff's important. Do the easy stuff.
Yeah.
Do that stuff easy. That's easy though.
Right.
That's easy to do. It just becomes regimented. Well, then when you're doing the easy stuff, the hard stuff's not so hard. Like, put your tools away. If you put your tools away, you're not spending 20 minutes looking for a 10 millimeter socket.
Right.
So that's my advice to people is like, you have to be so obsessed that people think that you're kind of weird.
Yeah.
I remember when I got into the motorcycle industry, my sister-in-law tell me, you've changed. I'm like, okay,
good.
I'm kind of trying to, a butterfly starts out as a
Caterpillar.
as a slug, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's right.
Caterpillar, right? And then there's a chrysalis, and then they come out the other end.
Yeah.
Totally different. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah.
Good. Hey, this question I've been wanting to ask you. You are part of the Hamsters.
I am.
Let's do this for people and listeners who may not or be very familiar with who the Hamsters are or what they do. Let's do this. I'll ask you a quick two-part. Give us a little background on what the Hamsters are all about, and number two is how you became part of it.
So I'll give you three answers.
Right,
the first answer is people ask us, what are the Hamsters? And this is my version of what the Hamsters are. The Hamsters are a t-shirt club with a custom motorcycle addiction that give a lot of money to charity and meet together and ride together and wear yellow shirts. Okay. If I pull out my handbook, real quick, it just says, what is it? It's belonging to the Hamsters organization is a privilege, but you have to have a custom motorcycle. You have to own a custom motorcycle, and a custom motorcycle, it says right here, if you're a Hamster, you know what a custom is.
Right.
It's not a bike with a paint job. It's not a bike with a couple parts on it. It is a custom built motorcycle. So your frame should be modified. It was, my dad used to have a rule, no unmodified parts. So even if you're bolting a part on, right?
That's cool.
You should, if you have to explain to somebody what a custom motorcycle is, they probably don't get it. So, but it's a custom motorcycle organization. It's a fraternity. I mean, we do call ourselves brothers to each other, but we're not a motorcycle club. We're not an MC. We're not an RC. Literally, the easiest way I can describe it, and hopefully I don't get in trouble for it, is the t-shirt club with a motorcycle addiction that spends a lot of time with each other. And there's a vetting process, and we give a lot of money to charity, dude.
I know.
But it's really, that's the one thing that we all can agree on is that we give, they've given several $1 million away.
And we're talking, for people who may not know, you're talking Arlen Ness, Dave Perowitz, Kendall John. You're talking some of the biggest names ever.
Yeah, anecdotally, there was 5 original members, right? There were Arlen Ness, Donnie Smith, Dave Perowitz, Ed Kerr, and Jimmy Leahy. And so those 5 guys all found themselves hanging out in Daytona, Laconia, Sturgis, all together all the time, right? And so they, as kind of a goof, I believe it was Susan Perowitz mentioned, and that they should start a little group and blah, blah, blah. I'm paraphrasing, but basically she wrote everybody's name, wrote Hamsters MC or Hamsters USA or something on paper plates, put them on everybody's hotel door, and kind of started there, right? And I believe it was at the King's Inn in Daytona in 1978. I know it was 1978, but since that time, you know, it's just grown and grown and grown to where we have 300, we're limited to like 375 guys. There's a vetting process.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to have
So how did you get in? How did you come about it with this?
So I originally thought that the Hamsters were just a bunch of rich dudes that rode with Arlen Ness and Dave Perowitz. I didn't, you know, and then there's not a lot of information out there about us. There weren't podcasts where people go, no, you know, here's what we are. We're a t-shirt club with a motorcycle addiction, you know? And so those dudes all had the coolest bikes on the planet. Like you can't deny that.
Right.
You want to see a bike show? You want to see the best bike show on the planet every year? It's not in Moon Eyes. It's not over in Verona rather. It's in Sturgis at the Spearfish Holiday Inn on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
The first Saturday night, because everybody's bikes are parked there. You want to see the bangers that you've seen in the magazine for the last 35 years. You want to meet the guys that built them for the last 40 years, 45 years. That's where you go. And so in 2016, I had mentioned that Cody and I went with Cody, helped him finish his FXR. He cleaned house that week, and he kept wanting to go up to the Hamsters and go hang out. And I was like, whatever, you know, they're just a bunch of rich dudes. I didn't know. I was ignorant. So I got to know some of them, and I got to know some of them really well. And then I got to know some of them that I didn't know were Hamsters. And I didn't, you know, people that I already knew that I didn't know were Hamsters. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, you're talking about the captains of our industry. You're talking about the guys that own the companies. You know, you have Nick Trask, who owns Trask. You have people that have passed on, you know, guys like Bruce Rossmeyer, Tank that built parts, Don Hotop, Arlen Ness. Arlen Ness was still alive in 16.
Right.
Corey Ness, Zach Ness, Max Ness, Paul Yaffe. You're like, wait a minute. These are all of the captains of our industry are all part of this organization. This is very interesting to me. And for a while, I was like, you know, I'm just a bike shop guy. Like, you know, I'm not a bike builder. Like, I build bikes, but it's not like I'm not. There's guys that they're so much more talented than what I am. I can't build a bike like Josh Allison builds.
Right.
I can't. I could copy his bike, but my brain doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a mechanical guy. I'm a drag racer. So everything that I do is like oversimplification for the purpose of being simple. Right. And so I'm not an Arlen Ness or Dave Perowitz. I'm just not. I don't think like them. And so anything that I would do that looks like theirs would be derivative. So that's what I do. If I want a bike that looks like Arlen Ness bike, I mean, I have an Arlen Ness bike right now, ironically enough, but I love it. You know what I mean? I've got a Y2K that I love it. But, so I started hanging around, and then I found out how do you become a hamster? So in 2016, I rode back to Florida with Corey Souza, who's been a hamster almost all of his adult life, because he worked for DP. And he was telling me, well, you got to ride to cert, you got to do this, you got to do that, there's these things. He said, is that something you're interested in? I'm like, yeah, I'm actually very interested in learning more. And so that was in 16. And then, so I started kind of pursuing hanging out with them, but not being the dude who's ingratiating himself into the circle, not being the guy that's not trying to steal anybody's conversation. I'm just trying to be the guy in the background. Right. So that I go through 16 to 17, I'm in Sturgis. 18, I missed Sturgis because of my dad passing away. 19, I go back. 20, I go back. And so in 2020, in 2020 during COVID, I'm in Daytona. Now I'm kind of, I know some hamsters, right? And they kind of know me. And I went up to one of them and I was like, listen, you're from Florida. I need a sponsor. Will you please sponsor me? And we walked over. He walked up to DP. He goes, hey, you know Jason? Yeah, I know Jason. I want to sponsor him. He said, make sure he's at the dinner Tuesday night. From that point on, I was at everything that I could possibly be. And then I went before the board. You have to go before a board.
Wow.
You know, there's a board of directors, and you're going through the original guys that are still there. Donnie, Dave, Ed, you know, Jimmy Leahy has passed on. Arlen Ness has obviously passed on. There's people in their board seats. And they, you know, you have to they ask you some questions. They're not like, you know, again, I'd never had my algebra test, but they, you know, what do you know about the hamsters? Why you want to be a hamster? What's the deal? You know? Mm-hmm. And then you have to take your custom motorcycle and have it basically graded. Cool. It has to be a custom. It has to be insured. It has to be licensed. It has to be in your name. It has to be this. It has to be that. And, So I went before the board, was accepted before the board in 2000, which made, or 2020, which made me eligible in 22. You go to that dinner every year and you don't know whose name's going to get called, right? So 2 years, you know, you have a minimum 2-year waiting period. So in 2022 was the first time I was eligible, didn't get picked, you know, the way it goes.
Right.
In my thought process with a lot of people, when that happens, they get really reticent and indignant about it. And well, some probably do. I don't know. They never get a yellow shirt,
Right,
you know,
right.
and they don't have it yet. And so, my theory was like, look, man, I know the first time that I'm eligible is gonna be in 22. If I don't get it in 22, pressure's off.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I'm consistently eligible. This is the group of men that I want to be associated with. This is a group of men that I want to hang out with. This is a group of men that I appreciate and respect and will honor what they say and do. And I learned through that process that that there are advantages to being a hamster, and there are and a lot of them are social. It's not like I don't get a hamster check, but I get a lot of hamsters that check on me. I get a lot of hamsters that want to know, you know, if I'm
great.
okay and everything's going good. And that's why I think we call each other brothers.
Amazing.
And it's really cool. If you've never been if you've never been in a social group, that's the people that are in the social group. I mean, every one of us has had a group of friends. And if you look back at high school, one of our friends is dead. One of them went to jail or is still in jail. One of them beats their wife.
Right,
like, we didn't have a way to vet our friends in high school.
Right.
My friends are vetted.
That's right.
I don't have to worry. There's very little asshole that I have to deal with.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think people are like, well, maybe they're standoffish and they stick to their own. And they're like, yeah, because they've all gone through this process of where like they know there's a social expectation, there's a financial expectation, there's a business expectation. I can't be a scumbag in my business.
Right.
I can tell you right now,
No.
if
There is no business if there is
if I step out of line, in any capacity in my life, there's a hamster going to call me, whether it be at home with my kids, my grandkids, shop, anything.
Right.
And I'm okay with that because I have the responsibility, not the right, but the responsibility to do that for my other hamster brothers. So we're not a club, but we're a very strong organization. I can tell you the first dinner I ever went to, you know, you're in this room and there's all these people and there's this, just, you want to know everybody. And, you know, you want to make sure that they know who you are because you don't want anybody to stand up in that meeting and go, hey man, I met him. He's a jerk. Right.
Right.
So I made sure I met everybody I could very passively, very, very nice. I sit down, I have dinner, typical, you know, catered dinner. And at the end of the 3 hours, I got to see them raise $675,000 in one room and induct like 15 members into. That was it, man. That was the most religious experience I've ever been through.
That's awesome.
And you see them give that money away, and you have like, it's Deadwood, South Dakota. Their annual budget for Meals on Wheels was $5,000, right, to feed all of the elderly.
Yeah,
$5,000. Ed Kerr, one of our original members, found out about that. So we're given to them.
Yes.
We were able to, in that one meeting in 21, we were able to over triple their budget. And every year we've given more and more every year to Meals on Wheels in Deadwood, to where they had $5,000. The first year there were 16, then there was 17, 18, 19. And I think we've given $35,000 in the last 3 years to Meals on Wheels, just in Deadwood.
Yeah.
Right. So we support, there is a hospital called Lifescapes that they've given, I believe they've given several $1 million to over the last several years. I know that that we've built an entire wing on that hospital. So that's not cheap. Yeah. And what that hospital does is, you know, it's sparsely populated in South Dakota. So these kids that have these debilitating diseases that need to have care, their parents are, you know, 6 hours away working, and they're in this hospital. So this place that we provide is housing for the parent, so the parent can be there while the patient, while their child patient is. Amazing, there's that. There's we also give to the Sturgis Museum, Hall of Fame Museum. You know, that's one of the charities that we, you know, the nonprofits that we support. And then, like I said, Meals on Wheels. But we do that if we have something going on in Daytona, we'll do a fundraiser in Daytona. Like we fundraise like crazy.
That's awesome, man.
And guys like Dave Perowitz are leaders in that capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That has to be an absolute honor to be a part of that. That's
Yeah, I mean, because even if I can't contribute as much as somebody else can,
right.
it all adds up. It aggregates, right?
Exactly.
So you're doing, as long as you're doing your part, it's
It's a
awesome.
collective. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
So it's something that I plan to be for the rest of my life. I made a commitment to myself and to the people that that I asked to be a part of that group. That part of what I was going to do for the rest of the remainder of my career was be a professional hamster. So I take that into consideration. Anything that I do, like how is this going to reflect on me? How is this going to reflect on Dave Perowitz? Because Dave Perowitz, in a lot of ways, I mean, it sounds corny, and I think he knows it. I've kind of told him a little bit, like, I don't have a dad anymore. Like, my dad's gone. My dad was my hero in this business and helped me start this business and walked next to me, that whole footsteps thing. Like, even, made sure that we had everything that we needed, no matter what he had to sacrifice to get it. And so Dave is a guy that I look up to in a capacity. I can go to, I know I can go to him for things.
Yeah.
He's been responsive to that. I'm like, hey man, I'm having this issue in my business. He's like, do this.
Right.
This is what I would do,
That's
and so
invaluable.
you can't buy that.
No, you can't.
Like, you don't have to buy it.
Yeah.
You put in the work, and that kind of help shows up at your door.
Right.
Thanks for sharing that, and thanks for explaining
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That is cool. I haven't had that insight before, and that really opens it up. I can't imagine what that feels like to be a part of that. That's incredible.
Yeah. It's very cool.
So switching gears, motorcycle custom scene, I guess the evolution of it, being a part of that custom scene for so long, how have you seen it evolved? What parts have you enjoyed? What parts not so much? And then what do you see for the future of the custom build industry?
Well, the part of it that really, I mean, you got to understand, like, I was kind of I was in a point in my life in February of 2003, where I was kind of looking for something, right? I had already resigned myself to the fact that I was not going to be drag racing anymore. It was just a giant bucket I was throwing money away into that I wasn't really drawing any inspiration from. Right.
Yeah.
And so, the motorcycle thing was a nice segue. Well, all the TV thing happened. So I call that the gold rush era. So I am a product of the gold rush era.
Right.
Like, I'm unabashedly unafraid to tell somebody, looks like I I always liked motorcycles. They were cool. I knew they were cool. I knew the guys that rode them were cool. But it wasn't something that I was passionate about. And then the TV thing happens, right? And the thing that really, really, really changed me were two things. One, American Choppers episode, the very first one, which I can't even find the pilot because I'd like to watch it, where they built the jet bike, right?
Yeah.
That was like seeing that guy work with his dad and seeing the dynamic that was there, even though it was all manufactured, because it was. Maybe not in that first episode, but as that show perpetuated, it really was. But I thought I could do this with my dad. This is something we can do. We got lots of jokes. I grew a goatee, and I'm like, everybody's like, oh, everybody that came into our shop, oh, do you guys fight like Paul and Steve Jr. do? I'm like, yeah, no. But and then the biker build off happened, where Billy Lane built a bike called Misbehavin'. That bike changed my life. There's two bikes that really, really, really changed my life. One of them was watching him build. When I watched Billy build Misbehaving on TV, and he's just in the shop, and he's just got dreads, and he's got a wallet chain, and he's got no shirt on, and he's fucking banging on the metal, and he's welding, and he builds his bike, and he rides it, and he looked so cool, man. And I thought, man, dude, like, that dude's my age. Like, we're only 2 years different,
Yeah.
And I didn't know him or anything, but I was like, I just felt like it was just like, boom. It was like I got struck by lightning. I'm like, I'm doing that. My wife's like, you're out of your freaking mind. You're not growing your hair long. You're not going to be a biker. I have this, you have that. I'm like, oh, whatever. So that changed my life. And then I start doing deep dives about what kind of, I mean, I was just obsessed, it was early days of the internet for me. So I'm like looking at choppers, and chopper was in wide chopper, this chopper, that chopper. And so I started to like a certain style of bike, and I wasn't receiving any signals from West Coast choppers. Like, it didn't show up on my radar. The magazines that I were buying the magazines are. That's my granddaughter pounding on the door. Hang on a second. Sorry about that,
That's
man.
okay.
Probably have to cut that out. Apologize. So I started, the West Coast stuff didn't show up on my radar. I wasn't seeing those shows for some reason, even though Motorcycle Mania came out in like 2000, right? And so I consider that era the gold rush era, and that's my golden era. I love those bikes. I love the pre-TV West Coast choppers. I love pretty much all of the long bikes that Billy did. So that set the stage for what kind of bike I liked. So I started building those kind of bikes.
You know who I thought was pretty underrated, even though he's a great builder, but I don't think Trevelin. Remember him?
I know Trevelin Ravenel, and Trevelin is one of the most underrated and underappreciated guys. He's not underrated. He's just underappreciated. And listen, if you know Trevelin, do you know him?
We had something scheduled for him to come on the podcast, and he had some changes in his plans, but we're still, I've chatted with him a little bit here and there, but man, I've just always loved his work, man. I just think
he and I have some mutual friends, and I've talked to him a couple times on the phone, and I will tell you, he's painfully private for good reasons.
Extremely private guy.
And there's, his work speaks for himself, but yeah, but he did a couple of TV things, and, and so then it starts happening. And that was one of the things that happened early on in my career, is like, you could get on TV, right? And so you just had to be the right place, right time, right wallet chain, right Dickies jacket, right patch, right beer, right, you know what I mean?
So
all the stuff had to kind of align, and everybody wanted to be on TV. And so I missed the first run of that. And then by the time the second run came through, that had jumped the shark, and I ended up on a TV show and did a whole episode. And they pull you off to the side, and they're like, "Hey, is this something you would really like? You're really, we see some promise in you. We want to build a show around you." And they do this whole thing, and then nothing ever comes of it. TV's the biggest jerk off session I've ever had. And, it still happens. And I take the bait every time. I'm like, yeah, I'll be on TV, but because the money is just obscene. Right. The money on TV is obscene.
Yeah.
You don't even have to be talented. And I know I can be talented.
Yeah.
So, you get into the custom, and you start building these customs, and then you have to find customers that want the bikes that you like. And so it goes back to being authentic. And I started being inauthentic, and I started building, I wanted to build bikes, so I would build the bike that the customer wanted instead of developing my own style. And that hurt me. That has always hurt me. And so now,
well, you had to pay bills, man. I mean, you had to do what you had to do to put food on the table. So, I mean, I understand.
And I still have to pay bills, and my bills are a lot higher today than what they were back then. But I absolutely flat out refuse to take on something anymore that I don't like to do. I will be honest with you and tell you, you asked about the arc of things. Like, so it was like choppers, and I was really into choppers, and then Big Dog and Texas Iron Horse, you could buy a chopper, and unless you knew what you were looking at, you couldn't tell the difference between a West Coast chopper and a Big Dog. Exactly. I mean, I can tell a mile away, but I know the craftsmanship that's in the one, and I know the manufacturer engineering that's in the other, right? And then big wheel bagger thing happened. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I absolutely abhor big wheel baggers.
You what?
I think they're a bore.
Me too.
Just I find them to be an aberration. I think they are, and I have built so many of them, and I've built some really nice ones that I'm really proud of.
Me too.
Hate them.
Me too.
With a white hot passion of a million burning suns. And I can appreciate, a good big wheel bagger.
Yeah, I mean, like, he builds beauties. I mean, they all these guys build these.
Corey Souza.
These guys build them. They're beautiful, but there's just, to me, there's no attraction to them. There's no
dude, I don't understand adding things to something that makes it less of what it's supposed to be. Like, the whole point of a chopper is like
less is more.
No blinkers. Like, I don't build bike. Like, if I build a bike for myself, it never has blinkers. It never has a speedometer. I might put a gas gauge on it. That's just, I've ran out of gas so many times on my chopper. I don't have a high-low beam. I'll have a horn just because I have a switch that I use that will allow me to put a horn on it, put a tiny one on it, but I just don't care. And so putting audio on a bike and putting all this, I hate it. Like, hate's not even a strong enough pejorative. And I shouldn't say it like publicly because We do a lot of them here.
I know.
You know, I built 2 in the last year, and they're nice. They're both
Yeah,
really great
listen,
bikes.
it's a preference. It's a preference thing. You know, you like them or you don't.
It's
I'm
that
like you.
bling
They
bling.
do absolutely nothing for me. I'm glad that people like them, and there's builders out there that build beautiful big wheel baggers. It's just not my thing. Hey, Jay, let
Yeah.
me ask you this, man. What's on the
Yep.
horizon as far as personal plans for you, future projects? What are you looking to do? What's the next venture for you as we're going into 2025 and on?
So I'm building for the first time since '08. I'm building myself a ground up
Yeah.
bike.
What are
I'm
you
really
doing,
excited about
FXR?
that. It's almost done. Yeah, yeah. If
Sweet.
you follow my social media at
Yeah.
all, it's the PK Ripper bike.
Yeah.
No, that goes back to my BMX days, the baby blue and gold.
That's
I
beautiful.
have I'm a sucker for, I love pro street bikes, but not 300 tire pro. I want a race bike. So I'm building myself a drag bike. Row Machine used to make a beautiful, just this really elegant FXR frame. And I'm a Sportster nerd.
Okay.
So I have a Sportster row frame that's never been titled, never been assembled, with a real carbon fiber fender, not one of these overlays,
Right.
and a real carbon fiber fuel cell,
Nice.
and gold performance machine alloy wheels, and a front end off of a Yamaha
No
R1.
shit.
It's going to have
Really?
it's going to have an insane Sportster motor in it. This is going to be my street
Awesome,
race
bro.
bike.
Sweet.
Building
What
that.
about for the
And then I've
podcast?
got, what's
What
that?
about for your podcast? Well, what's your
My
goal?
podcast, you know, I want to go to video. That's something that I have on my short list of things to do. As I was saying earlier, you know, I want to do it right though. I don't think anybody has any, you know, I've said before, like there's things that I do that I'm not the best in the world at. I have the oldest custom motorcycle podcast. I think I have the oldest motorcycle
That's
only
awesome.
podcast, but, you know, cause it goes back to, like I said, 2011,
Yeah.
but, I don't have to, because I got out of the starting blocks as early as I did, I don't have to sprint. I can kind of just trot along.
Yeah.
So as people come to me that, you know, they're interesting, I don't just want to I've done it before where I have guests on that are kind of, they're not really all in. They don't really understand it, or they don't really give a shit about it. They'll do it, but you know, I don't want that. I want to sit down with people that actually
Right.
want to find out what's going on. You know, I don't care how, I like long podcasts too. I mean, I enjoy the shit out of
Me
all
too.
that stuff. So,
Mhm.
so for on the short run, I mean, I don't know. I'm never gonna not have it. I don't know that I'll ever be able to make it be a part of how I make a living. I haven't figured that out yet. I think that the only way that's one space where I can tell you that I'm not influenced by anybody. Like you know, I am a fledgling stand-up comedian. So I've just started performing,
Nice.
and that's something that I wanted to do for 35
Oh,
years.
wait.
that
We
I've-
could
25
go.
years.
Where are you doing this? Because that's
So I
Serge and I
perform
can
Wednesday
drive up.
nights. Yeah. So there's a place called Laugh Out Lounge. I do my comedy under a pseudonym, under Jay Richards. So on Instagram, there's a new profile called Jay Richards Comedy. And so I post some stuff up there. I've just started again. You know, this is not something I'm trying to do for a living. It's something I'm trying to do to
Right.
live and to try to have an outlet for myself, a hobby. And so, I kind of approach everything that way. Like I have enough obsessions. Like I've been obsessed enough about motorcycles to where I really know what I dislike and like now, and the part of the business that I like and dislike. I mean, there's something that I do that I call going dark, where I'll get in the midst of selling somebody something or on a deal or having, and I do it when I'm trying to be funny too, where I turn into something that is the most organic person that I've ever been, to where I'm not governed by any rules in my, I don't have something sitting on my shoulder going, say this, say that, or
Yeah.
don't say this, don't. And it's just really,
Right.
it allows me to be who I truly am from the core of my being, from my soul. And I'm a really, really thoughtful and good salesperson. And I can get to the bottom of what someone's looking for. And so I'm trying to learn how to do that, how to
Awesome.
flex those muscles too, to be a comedian, just to amuse myself. But if getting back, and the reason why I'm telling you that is because if my podcast ever turns into anything I really do for a living, it'll be because I'm doing Sherry's Berries commercials. It'll be because someone
Right.
sees the value in it. And, you know, and they're going to go, I think I'll do it long enough and well enough that one day someone's going to go, holy shit. Like he's been doing this is not a new guy.
Right.
Like no one can say that about me. Like about the podcast thing. If they're like, I didn't know you had a podcast. I'm like, yeah, well, check it out. It's on every, in 2022, I was in the top 5% of downloaded podcasts worldwide on Spotify.
Jeez,
That's
man.
incredible,
And
man.
you know what I mean? That's a lot. That's a
killer,
lot of
bro.
listeners around the
Yeah,
globe, right?
it's
So,
killer.
but no one's ever, I mean, I've gotten some money, and I shouldn't say I never get paid. Like I do have some sponsors and stuff, but it's not enough to live
Yeah.
off of in any capacity. And so I'm not trying to do that. If it ever happens, it'll be because it happens for the right reasons. Just like being
Yeah.
on TV. I would love to be on TV. I think it would
You
be a
will
fantastic TV
You will
guy.
be.
And in 2016, I got flown out to Burbank, California to do a screen test for a new show that Richard Rollins had called Garage Rescue, I think, or Garage Rehab.
Mhm.
And I rode to the screen test with the guy who ended up getting the job. And the reason why I didn't get the job, I love this. And this is for anybody that's doing something that you don't know if you're doing on the right path or not. I didn't get the job because they said that I was a recycled Jesse James.
Huh.
And I went there wearing the same kind of clothes I have on today, a pair of Dickies pants or red cap pants or
What you
1620s.
wear
I don't
every
remember.
day.
Back then I was probably a pair of red, but I mean, I was being me is what I'm
Right.
getting at.
Wow.
And so I didn't get the
Fuck.
job because the guy that did had his perfect beard, perfect coiffed hair, perfect, ill-fitting leather jacket, skinny jeans, cuffed at the bottoms with work boots that had never seen a day of work in their
Oh
life. And
my
I thought,
gosh.
I lose to that. I don't give a shit. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be
Doesn't make
somewhere where
anything
I'm not
better,
really wanted for who I
Right,
am.
right.
Because I
Yeah.
don't have it, dude. I don't have it in me to mince words or be fake.
Right.
Right.
I'm 50. I'll be 52 this year. I just don't care.
Okay.
And it sounds like I'm being insensitive, but I'm
it's
not.
not.
I'm
It's
being
not.
so sensitive to the situation that I have to be authentic at all times. If you see me pissed off, I'm
being
really
real.
pissed off. If you see me happy, I'm really happy. I don't do anything. I don't do anything, literally. There's nothing I do anymore in my life that I don't want to do. So if I'm doing something with you or for you, just know that I'm exactly where I want to be. And I think that should give people peace.
Yeah.
And people take it as an insult.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I've
listen.
had people get insulted. by
We want
That's a
you
great
happy
point.
in the speed round, and that's what's coming up next. So
Okay, very
we
good.
got 15 questions, 2 minutes on the clock. So
Okay.
let's hear some fun stuff. Let's do it, Ben.
All right. First question. If your bike could talk, what's one thing it would nag you about?
Dude, lay off the throttle. The rolling
All
burnouts.
right.
I love rolling burnouts.
Oh, nice. All right. What would be the absolute worst superpower to have while riding?
I don't know what the worst superpower is, but I know what my favorite superpower. I keep thinking about this. I want to be able to honk the horn of the car, not in front of me, the one in front of him. I want to be able to not.
okay.
Gotcha.
want to be able to honk the horn of the car right in front of me, right? So I can
Yeah.
see the guy in front of him turn around and go like this, and he can go like, I don't know. That's the superpower.
That's
The
hilarious.
superpower I don't want.
Yeah.
Man, I would love to have a superpower. I'm not gonna lie to you. I've been a
Sure.
Batman fan. That's why I have Batman tattooed on my wrist
Okay.
there. He doesn't have any superpowers.
He's just rich.
That's what's cool about Batman.
There you go.
Yeah.
I love that you've put thought into the horn one before. I can picture you on the
Yeah.
road thinking about like, man, if they just honk their horn.
Yeah. I
All
want
right.
to honk his horn.
That sounds weird. What is the best? What's the best or your favorite motorcycle that you've owned or ridden?
My West Coast chopper.
Nice.
Right on.
Which one
Yeah.
do you have?
My CFL. I had a
Oh,
CFL.
okay, nice.
It's a pretty famous one. If you
That was
Google
his big, that was
if
his
you
big one.
Google well, yeah, but my particular, if you Google Angel of Death CFL, it'll come up and you'll see it. Like
All
that
right,
one was
kill it.
mine. That was one I built for myself.
All right. Okay, if motorcycles didn't exist, what weird hobby would you be known for?
Putting what weird hobby?
Yeah, weird.
I'm a shoot. I'm into clothing and fashion. I'm not gonna lie. I love high
All
fashion.
right, cool.
Right on.
Yeah.
I tried. We're gonna have to
So
go back to the Googling the Angel of Death thing. I tried that. That's what took me a second to ask that next question. It didn't come up. We'll connect on
Oh,
that
really?
later.
Angel of Death, see it? West Coast chopper. So
West Coast. So I just want to add that to the show notes for listeners. So,
Right.
All right. Next question. What is your guilty but go-to pleasure for an alcoholic beverage? And if you don't drink, what's your go-to snack?
I do drink. I love to drink. And not excessively, although it does happen. My go-to drink is any beer in overseas in England. I love to go to
Okay,
England.
right
That's my favorite place in the world.
Okay,
So
cool.
I go there all the time.
Super cool. What's the most underrated piece of gear every new rider should consider?
Underrated piece of gloves.
All right.
Nice. Yep.
It seems to be a consistent flow.
That's that's
Yeah, I see
stacking up.
people ride without gloves all the time. I'll ride in shorts, but I have gloves on.
As long as you're not wearing flip flops. All right.
No, dude, Google that.
Okay,
You want to
cool.
Google something weird?
Yeah.
Google flip-flop motorcycle
no, man,
rides.
I can't
Yeah,
stand
it's
people
gnarly.
riding. I
Ugh.
think they go
That's
into
scary.
the beach. I know.
All right, if you could get up on stage and sing, actually, we're going to change this one. It's normally would you get up on stage with one band. Instead, if you could get up on stage with one other comedian, who would it be?
Right now it'd be Shane Gillis, but
Yes.
probably my all-time to get on stage would be Bert Kreischer.
Bert is.
I've met him a couple times, and
He is.
yeah, he's great
yeah,
because he tells stories.
freaking Shane Gillis, man. They're making him at night. If you could recommend one book, film, or documentary to every motorcycle enthusiast, what would it be?
Book, film, or documentary?
Yeah.
Oh man, I have my favorite book in the world that I used to give to my kids that wouldn't read. So I would want to give them something that would make them want to read more. So it would be the book called A Painted House.
Okay.
A Painted House.
That's cool.
All right.
It's a John Grisham novel.
You wake up with the voice.
No, that's not what you were looking for.
No, I'm writing it down. I trust your opinion on that one.
Yeah, for sure.
You wake up with the voice of a cartoon character. Which one do you hope it is?
Did I?
We do this to fuck with people.
Stewie from Family Guy.
Oh, man, great one. Great one. Nice.
Mom,
Hey,
mom,
Brian.
mommy,
Hey, Brian.
mama,
That's
mom,
so
mommy.
Ma, where's my money, man? Where's my money?
Where's my money?
Give me my money, man.
Hey, you got it, man. That's pretty good. All right, best place you've ever ridden and why?
The best place I've ever ridden, up north in Michigan, and it was because you can get to, when you're in Michigan, everything up north would be like north of Bay City, and you can get there by going up 75, or you can go, if you take up and go through 13, and 13 is just, it reminds you that Michigan is 95% one of the most beautiful states in the country.
Yeah.
And 10% one of the worst places in the country. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like Detroit is such a, I love Detroit, but
I know.
I'm glad I'm from Detroit and not in Detroit.
Detroit.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, sure.
You go up 13 in Michigan. It's a great ride.
All right, what's a common maintenance mistake that even experienced riders sometimes make?
Brake fluid. That's the number one thing I see in my shop that people don't do is they don't get rid of their .4 brake fluid. They let it eat the ass out of the brake system, and it doesn't work.
Good insight. If you could time travel, which era would you visit and why?
Oh, dude, I would absolutely. The 50s,
Right on.
because deodorant was already being used.
Yes.
pretty answer great.
Dude,
Cars were starting to get really,
Yeah,
really
man.
cool.
That was
Yeah.
the
Men were
change.
men dressed like men. They had
Yeah.
they all wore my grandfather had the same outfit every single day. It was Dickies, a white t-shirt, and a sweatshirt, whether it was 100 degrees or 100 below zero. It
Yeah.
was the same thing. Like, put the oil in the hair and do the whole deal. Yeah.
Did he roll his
50s.
sleeves? Was he a sleeve roller?
Probably as a young man, he would have been, but by the time I knew him, he smoked Cools,
Yes.
which that was kind of cool.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I guess now that you say that, yeah, I remember him rolling his pack of Cools in his left
That's
side. Yeah. When he
what I
had
was
this
looking to hear.
sweatshirt off. Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny, man. All right, last dinner ever. What would it be?
That's easy, dude. So lobster tail,
All right.
just eat it till I'm my gout I can't even walk.
Yeah. So just skip the turf and just roll with the surf, just lobster tail.
Oh yeah, dude. If you told me right now,
Main lobster
you can have
bomb.
sushi or steak, but whatever one you have, you can never have the other again. I would never eat steak again. I would
Really?
just go for the
Just go
sushi.
with the sushi, right?
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Hard for me. I love steak.
Yeah.
All right. What's the best prank you've ever pulled on a fellow rider?
Oh, okay. The best prank I've ever pulled on a fellow rider. maybe shutting their button off, like when they're, you're
At
at
the
a light,
stop.
that
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
man,
thing.
a
Yeah.
light or
Classic.
something.
Yeah, I try not to mess with people very much on the motorcycle thing, just because
Safety and
motorcycles
stuff
don't
like
stay
that.
up on their own,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I'm not the safest person in the world, but
All right, here's the last one. You made it. The last one is, besides the Garage Life podcast and the One Gang podcast, what is your favorite podcast out there right now?
So I can only pick one.
You can give us 3 if you want.
All right.
So I'll just tell you right off the rip, you got the Fast Life Garage podcast. If you want to know what's
Fast
going
Life
on in
is
the
good.
motorcycle industry, Fast Life Garage is it. Another good motorcycle podcast is Tony Tucker's Tucker Speed podcast.
You're talking Fast Life is Jason's, right?
The Fast Life Garage, yeah, that's Jace. Yeah, the Fast Life Garage
we had him
podcast.
on. We had him
Fast
on
Life
the show,
podcast.
man. He's a great one.
He's a great dude. He's a
Yeah.
good friend of mine. And aside from that, right now, I like to laugh. I mean, obviously, Theo Vaughn's
love
this
Theo
past
Vaughn.
weekend.
This past
I do
weekend is
too.
hilarious.
God, that guy is. I don't know when he's being real or not real,
Right.
and I really don't care
Yes.
because I think he's
It's
just a
hilarious.
nice
He is,
human.
he
He's on
is.
my list of people I want to meet.
Yeah.
So,
He
he's
was
a good
freaking
dude.
out. I don't know if you listened to the one when he was on Rogan, and Rogan had him on, and he was just having this bad day, and he would flip out, but you could just feel his emotion. That's what I love about him. He's so real, Like you said, you don't know if
when
he's
he's-
right, if he's joking or he's not joking. He's just so real. I love that about him
Yep.
too, man.
What's
he's a class.
What's the Tucker one that you said? I haven't heard of that one.
Tucker Speed.
Tucker
Tucker
Speed.
Speed. Tony Tucker he owns a bike shop in Ogden, Utah, and he's a Bagger Racing League racer. He's a really nice guy. He and I have become friends over the last 6-8 years, and he's got a really nice. His podcast is very well produced
That's
and
nice.
has some really interesting guests on it.
That's cool.
Sweet.
Guys that that maybe you don't know.
We'll
I
link
think
that up.
podcasts is how you should be introducing people to people they don't already know. Like, it's cool to have Jesse James on a podcast.
Yeah,
That is
of
cool.
course.
You're gonna get watches and views for that, right? But nobody's gonna walk away from that podcast and go, I didn't know that about him.
Right.
That guy's put himself on blast for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I want to find out about, like Bob Kay was just on Jace's podcast. And Bob Kay, I mean, if you don't know Bob Kay, he's been in the industry 50 some years. He used to own Nemco. I mean,
Yep.
which turned into Biker's Choice, which is now distributed by Turn 14. I want to know that kind of stuff. I
Yeah.
had Tom Motzko on my podcast. You asked me earlier.
Yeah.
That's who you need to go listen to. Tom Motzko has been at Drag Specialties since 1974. When Fred Fox bought it in 81 or 82, he showed Fred Fox where his CEO office was going to be. And Tom Motzko is still there as the director of vendor
That's
development.
amazing.
I love that guy. I just talked to him last week. He's a great friend of
That's
mine,
cool.
and he's a fellow
Awesome.
Hamster.
That's cool.
All right, we're going to
Yep,
link it
yep.
up. Sweet. Well, you survived, Jason. You made it through the speed round. That was really great having you, man. You've
Thank
got
you,
some awesome
buddy.
insights and incredible history. We appreciate you, man.
I can't thank you enough, man. This has been really, really fun. I don't get to do it from this side very often,
Yeah.
and so I appreciate it when I
No,
do.
man,
get to
we
do that. I like your
appreciate
hoop
you
shirt,
taking
by
the
the way.
time. Thanks.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man.
So,
We'll be good.
Hey, you kick ass in 2025, man.
Thank you.
And we're only about an hour and a half apart, so maybe we meet somewhere halfway, grab some dinner together one day.
Anytime. That would be great.
Oh, we're going
I'd
to come
love
see
that.
one of your shows. That's already decided.
There you go.
We're going.
Yeah. Hey, listen, send me your schedule when you're gonna do it, okay? And we'll
Yeah, I
come
will.
up. We'll
Yeah,
pick
we'll
a day.
come
We'll
up.
come up on you're strictly Wednesdays.
Yeah, right now I'm doing Wednesdays because I'm just getting started. So,
Right.
you go up and you get 5 minutes to go up there, but it's fun. It's a great place. They don't
Heck
charge
yeah.
an entry fee on Wednesday nights. So
right,
I'll,
cool.
I'll be up there tonight, but
All right,
Sweet.
sounds
We'll
good,
bring
brother.
some cabbage.
awesome,
All
man.
right. Thanks,
All right.
Jason. Appreciate you, man.
Be good, man.
Yeah, man. Take care.